time.
Yeah, that is definitely so key there, and I'm glad that you brought up not only the data is important, but also seeing the video, especially because we definitely see with our eyes there, and can really make those memories vivid with video there. So we appreciate it, Mark, for coming on and really give us some great insight of what you and your team does, and we wish you the best.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate being able to explain it further. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. We'd love to have you on more. Thank you so much.
You bet.
And we are going to take another 2-minute break right here on Live Now from Fox. When we come back, we are going to take you back out to Perry, Florida. Get an update from Governor Ron DeSantis. That is coming up next here on Live Now from Fox. And we're back here for you on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate you continuing to join with us right here. We want to go out to the latest Governor Ron DeSantis update out of Florida. Let's bring it to you right here on Live Now from Fox.
Perspective, from a fish and wildlife perspective, anything in terms of what needs to be done. So they've done a good job, and of course we have many hundreds of National Guard just right here in Taylor County. This is kind of the ground zero deployment for them, and if there's more that's needed, we'll be able to surge more accordingly. We've activated 5,500 members of the Florida National Guard. We also have some of our members of the State Guard, and then we have 8 urban search and rescue teams. So we are well equipped to be able to respond to whatever comes down the pike today into tomorrow, and hopefully, we're hoping for the best. We're hoping that there's not going to be a need to use all those resources to effectuate rescue operations, but we'd rather be safe than sorry. Okay, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. Where am I headed? Good afternoon. We were able to tour some of the damage here in Taylor County alongside Sheriff Wayne Padgett. I'm also joined by FDOT Secretary Jared Perdue, who will provide an update on some of the roads. We have General John Haas, Florida National Guard, Senator Corey Simon, Representative Schoaf, CFO Petronas, County Chairman Jamie English, and then behind we have some of our Florida State Guard, including in that is one of our state reps from Miami, Rep Fabricio, so I want to thank him for his service. I think as you see behind me, there's a lot of debris, a lot of trees knocked down, You see interruption of power lines and trees going over power lines. There's going to be a lot that's going to be required to be able to clean this up and to get everything back up and running again. We were not able to get down to Steinhatchee. Those roads are not passable yet, so as soon as that's the case, we're going to try to do it. Now, there are emergency personnel that have headed down there, of course, and so we've got Florida National Guard, Fish and Wildlife, all of our key people, as well as the local law enforcement down there. I talked with the sheriff about kind of some of the challenges. They did get a lot of water down there. There's no question. They have not received any call regarding a fatality as a result of that storm surge, but that's up to this point. I mean, so we'll see what happens as people go down there. There's going to be a lot that's going to need to be done in that area. They got an awful lot of water. There are reports of people trying to loot down in Steinhatchee. And I've told all of our personnel at the state level, you protect people's property, and we are not going to tolerate any looting in the aftermath of a natural disaster. I mean, it's just ridiculous that you would try to do something like that on the heels of an almost Category 4 hurricane hitting this community. I'd also just remind potential looters that you never know what you're walking into. People have a right to defend their property. This part of Florida, you got a lot of advocates and some proponents of the Second Amendment. And I've seen signs in different people's yards in the past after these disasters, and I would say it's probably here. You loot, we shoot. You never know what's behind that door. If you go break into somebody's house and you're trying to loot, these are people that are going to be able to defend themselves and their families. So I would not do it. We are going to hold you accountable from a law enforcement perspective at a minimum, and it could even be worse than that depending on what's behind that door. So let's all band together and lift people up and not try to take advantage of a difficult situation. We're going to have a report on some of the roads with FDOT. Now, by and large, the roads are, I would say, probably better than what I would have thought, just given the severity of the storm. Now, you see, there's a lot here for sure, but we were able to get from Tallahassee down here without much of a problem. I know Jared and his team, they've already cleared a lot of roadways. There's going to be more that needs to be done. We understand how important that is. And the same thing with the power restoration. Those efforts are ongoing. As soon as the storm passed where it was safe to go, these guys have been out working. Now, in a place like Taylor County, some of this stuff, you can see, you just have to reconnect it. Probably won't be as difficult. There's other parts in Taylor County where the poles have been knocked down. Some of them may be snapped in half. That's going to require a little bit more extensive effort to be able to get that up and running. So all of that is going to be tackled, and all that is going to be done. They want to get people hooked up back online as quickly as possible. So I want to thank everybody for what they've been able to do to work to help respond. There's going to be more that's done just in the emergency response with our first responders all through today and all through the night. They're going to keep going as long as they're needed. And then, of course, getting everybody back on their feet with clearing this debris. That's going to be a huge effort, as well as the power restoration in the areas where you really had serious interruption to the overall power lines and power poles. But thanks everybody for doing that. I appreciate all the linemen for what they've been able to do. Thanks to all the folks here locally who worked really hard. This is we haven't had a storm take this path at this level since the 1890s to hit this part of Florida. So this is something that is a really big deal, and not that you ever want to do, but there's parts of Florida that have had these things happen, and they've built up infrastructure and in response to it. Well, this part of the state hasn't necessarily seen a storm like this in quite some time. So that's just going to present challenges, but I appreciate everybody rallying around, people stepping up, and really appreciate the resiliency that I'm seeing throughout all these counties, particularly in the Big Bend region of Florida. Okay, we're going to hear from Secretary Perdue, then we're going to hear from Sheriff Wayne Padgett.
All right, thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your continued leadership throughout this event. FDOT is continuing to push crews inward through the major arteries that are impacted by this storm. We have over 700 crew members and a lot of heavy equipment that are headed this way. You're going to begin seeing them working. Some of our priorities, one is to make sure all the bridges are safe and passable. We've inspected most of the bridges in this area at this point. There are still a few areas that are not accessible. The governor mentioned one of them in Steinhatchee and also State Road 24 going in to Cedar Key. You're going to see our cut and toss crews coming this way. They're pushing their way in right now. One of our main objectives is to get roads clear so that life safety mission can continue, and also to support the power restoration. You notice there's a lot of trees, vegetation on power lines. We want to help get that power restored as quickly as possible with our cut and toss crews. One thing that we noticed as we were surveying the area, the traffic signals are definitely out of power here in this area. We have generators en route. We're going to be getting generators set up to get those signals powered up as quickly as possible. That's going to be a priority of ours so that the residents of this area can move around freely and safely. As we continue to work through this event, road closure information is going to change and adjust as we get things cleared. I would encourage all of you to use Florida511.com. That is the most timely and accurate information for traffic and detours. And remember, if roads are flooded, please do not drive through them. You never know what's going on underneath the water. We want you to stay safe and get where you're going safely. Again, Governor DeSantis, thank you for your leadership.
Yes, I want to thank the governor for sending in the troops and helping us. He sent us National Guard. It's always have a great leader. We want to thank everybody that's come forward to help us. We took a lick from almost a Cat 4 hurricane. But I'll tell you, it feels good to know that you can count on your people when you need them. Taylor County, we're going to make it. Just hang in there. If you don't have to go somewhere, don't go. Stay home. We still got trees down, power lines down, and we just need you to stay home, stay put. Don't be out sightseeing and just causing a problem, getting in the way of our law enforcement and our cleanup crews. So thank you. Stay home, and we'll get through this. Just be strong. Thank you.
And we're going to continue to respond as local communities have more needs for support. The Division of Emergency Management for the state of Florida is ready to fulfill those requests. We appreciate everybody's hard work, and we're going to continue to work through this over these next days, weeks, and a hurricane of this magnitude. You're talking about months that are going to go into some of the things when you start talking about rebuilding and even beyond that. And so we understand that, and we're in it for the long haul. Okay, anyone have any questions?
Governor, 2 questions here. What's your message to Floridians who are trapped or stranded right now?
Well, if you are in distress, you can call 911, and there will be rescue efforts that will commence. The storm is past. The first responders are active. We have everybody from local law enforcement, local fire rescue. We have National Guard. We have Fish and Wildlife that can make waterborne rescues. And we have urban search and rescue teams. And so that's all there. And so if you are in harm's way or you are in peril, you call emergency, and there will be a response.
And then, Governor, President Biden just spoke at the White House. He said he had a chance to speak with you, that even though you guys don't agree politically, during times like this, you can put politics aside. Is the feeling mutual?
Yes, we have to deal with supporting the needs of the people who are in harm's way or have difficulties. And that has got to triumph over any type of short-term political calculation or any type of positioning. This is the real deal. You have people's lives that have been at risk. We don't necessarily have any confirmed fatalities yet, but that very well may change. And then you have people whose livelihoods have been turned upside down. And so they need support. So we're going to work together from local, state, federal, regardless of party, to be able to deliver results for the people in their time of need.
Governor, Florida is such a diverse state, and this is very different than what we experienced with Ian. How is this operation going to be different? What sort of unique challenges does this operation pose?
Well, the difference is, I think one difference between this and Ian is Ian was hit Category 5 going into Fort Myers, but then it went all the way up the the interior of the state all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean around Daytona Beach. So the sheer number of people who were without power and suffered severe damage was probably as much as ever happened in a hurricane in the history of the state of Florida. I think this storm, the bands, there's obviously impacts far and wide, and we've seen tornado activity and things even hundreds of miles away, but I'd say the bulk of the storm going through north central Florida. What you're going to see with all the wooded areas, you're going to see a lot more trees. You're going to see a lot more debris. There was debris, of course, for Hurricane Ian, but it was, I think, a more diverse array of debris. It wasn't all just trees. It was different pieces of boats and different pieces of structures. And in some ways, that was a big challenge. I think this, we know where the debris is. We know there's a lot of debris, and so we'll be working with the local communities to be able to do it. You know, some of these communities in this part of the state have never necessarily been hit with a major hurricane before. And I know there's some in like north central Florida, they may not have a debris removal contract in place, whereas a county like Lee down in southwest Florida, they are going to have that because they know that's something they got to deal with. So some of this stuff, they're going to probably need to lean on the state to be able to help. They're under-resourced counties, and we stand by ready to help them be able to get that done.
And Governor, along those lines, already this morning, we've seen a number of predatory refuse removal crews that are already roaming the streets and telling people they need money to clear the roads. What do you there's going to be times like these. There's always people that want to come up and try to scam you. Just be very weary of what people are telling you right now. There are going to be crews to clear the roads, certainly the public roads, are going to be done. If you get into private debris removal, it becomes a little bit trickier in terms of what is reimbursed and this and that. But certainly on the right-of-ways, that is going to be taken care of, and it's public right-of-way. That's kind of the core mission for debris removal.
Governor, you noted no fatalities reported yet. Was there anything on the planning and preparation side, local evacuation orders, et cetera, that might have contributed to what sounds like an encouraging statistic? So,
look, we'll see as the day and tomorrow goes on in terms of what we are looking at in terms of fatalities. Well, I can tell you with Hurricane Ian, as soon as that storm hit, within an hour after it hitting, there were frantic phone calls to 911 locally there of people that were literally drowning in their house. And it was something that you just, and when I was talking to the sheriff, I remember talking to the sheriff down in Lee County on the phone, just the feeling of dread that those phone calls represented, you knew that there was going to be a lot of problems. We have not seen that in the same way on this storm. And I think part of it is that when you see storm surge of that nature like we saw during Ian, I think a lot of people really heeded the warnings that their local officials issued, because you can't hide from the storm surge like in your house. Like if it comes and it's 10, 12 feet, you're gonna be in a world of hurt. And so it's not worth the risk. So I think a lot of people understood that. You gotta run away from that water, get out of the area, get to higher ground, and you can hunker down in a safe structure. And that could mean saving your life. So I think a lot of people understood that. I think a lot of them did that. We obviously had really significant storm surge in both Cedar Key and Steinhatchee. And clearly, the storm surge there was enough to potentially be life-threatening if people didn't take proper precautions. But I think most of the people did, and I think they probably really protected themselves and their families as a result.
Governor, Florida State Guard, we saw some uniformed personnel with red hats. Can you give us any insight as to what the new Florida State Guard services they provided or anything they did?
So the guys behind me here for our State Guard, they came in and they're assisting with damage assessments. And that obviously is important information to be able to get back to the state so that we know what we need to do from a transportation perspective, from a fish and wildlife perspective, anything in terms of what needs to be done. So they've done a good job. And of course, we have many hundreds of National Guard just right here in Taylor County. This is kind of the ground zero deployment for them. and if there's more that's needed, we'll be able to surge more accordingly. We've activated 5,500 members of the Florida National Guard. We also have some of our members of the State Guard, and then we have 8 urban search and rescue teams. So we are well equipped to be able to respond to whatever comes down the pike today into tomorrow. And hopefully, we're hoping for the best. We're hoping that there's not going to be a need to use all those resources to effectuate rescue operations, but we'd rather be safe than sorry.
Governor Ron DeSantis giving his latest update there, an assessment there as Hurricane Idalia still on the move there after hitting Florida earlier this morning as a Category 3 storm. We are going to take our third break here of this hour. Stay right here with us. Always more to come on Live Now from Fox.
All across not only Florida, but also South Carolina. Our CB Cotton is in Savannah. Katie Byrne is live for us also in Charleston, South Carolina. We will be checking in with them and keeping you ahead of the storm right here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ.
And welcome back. We are taking a look out
Welcome
towards
with Florida
Savannah,
Governor
Georgia
Ron
right now.
DeSantis
Another area
approving the state's
in the
emergency declaration ahead of the storm, authorizing the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA to coordinate disaster relief.
We have pre-positioned different types of resources across all 3 states, our urban search and rescue teams, our disaster survivor assistance teams, and they are all ready to pivot to the most impacted areas immediately after the storm passes.
The agency is also working on long-term recovery efforts in Maui after wildfires there devastated the community of Lahaina, leaving more than 100 dead.
We are prioritizing funding for Idalia, for the Maui fires, and any other extreme weather events that are coming our way without interruption.
FEMA's disaster relief fund set to run out of money soon unless Congress passes additional funding. Republicans have criticized the White House for pushing to tie funding for FEMA to additional assistance for Ukraine.
The president put forward what he thinks is incredibly important that we need. These are incredibly important, not just for the president, for the American people, right? We have to keep our commitments on both sides of these things.
The White House says officials will brief President Biden today on the recovery efforts in Maui and the latest on Hurricane Idalia. At the White House, Rich Edson, Fox News.
Brightline has once again delayed the start of its rail service connecting South Florida to Orlando. The company says the delay is partly storm-related. This is Brightline's second delay. Their first one was...
All right, we wanted to feature a little bit there from Fox 35 in Orlando. We'll continue to do it here for you on Live Now from Fox. We have one last break here this hour. We are going to get it in right now. Stay right here with us. More to come on Live Now.
A secondary threat that we have to really continue to watch. We have tropical storm winds expected all throughout the duration of Idalia as it's exiting off towards the Atlantic. We can see that wind field pretty expansive, covering at least 2 states at a time as it drives off towards the north. The wind field for Hurricane Gusts is a bit smaller, and as it heads back out towards the Atlantic, we can see it expanding. But for the most part, all of our coastal communities from Savannah through at least Hatteras are going to be experiencing tropical storm force wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. We take a close look at some of the areas from Georgetown up towards Myrtle Beach and into North Myrtle. We could see wind gusts upwards of 40, near 50 miles per hour as we head into later tonight. Michael?
And Kiana, you know, the video that we're getting in places like Steinhatchee are just incredible. If you look at the bottom of your screen, it looks like a boathouse. That boathouse was completely compromised because of the strength, the intensity, and the power of that storm surge. And we have Mark Sudduth joining us right now in Lake City. And I'm curious, Mark, you know, you actually were able to get that advantage point and get that perspective. What was it like to see that type of power from the storm surge?
As many times as I've seen it, Michael, I'm still amazed. You know, it doesn't matter. It's always different. Every hurricane is different, and this was no exception. Seeing that surge move up the Steinhatchee, very similar to what we saw last year with Hurricane Ian moving up the Steinhatchee River. Powerful force the water is. We saw what it did last year during Ian, a similar scenario, but a different part of the coast up here in the Nature Coast area, the Big Bend of Florida.
Yeah, and where you are, by the way, just to give people some relational perspective, where you are in Lake City, that's much further inland. You are well away from the actual Gulf of Mexico itself. What did you experience further inland?
So today I've been anywhere from Tallahassee up to Madison along I-10 and then Lake City the last few hours. trees down in some places, truckers you can see them moving now, finally. On 75, coming off of 10, there were a few areas where people were teaming together, using their big trucks and chains and tow straps to move those pine trees. You've talked about those pine trees. They were down, and they were blocking the interstate. These truckers had places to be and goods to deliver. Now it looks like they're doing a pretty good job of that in these hours after Idalia's landfall. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, boy, it's nice to see the traffic behind you. Boy, the imagery that we're seeing, I mean, it in ways very much so in Perry, Florida, almost resembles what you see when a tornado moves through. Of course, we've had a number of tornado warnings, but I imagine that wind through even Lake City, because it was still a very powerful hurricane, even after it made landfall, it wasn't the storm surge, but the wind must have done some damage where you were at as well, right?
That's right. You bring up that point. There are these different impacts. And wind, of course, most people think about hurricanes as a wind machine. The storm surge is probably the most destructive and the most potential for loss of life. But yes, the wind in the interior areas was substantial enough that there are power outages. There's inconveniences going on. And all of that, of course, as you've been talking about here on Fox Weather, moving deeper into the southeast, actually heading to my hometown of Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm down here in Lake City. How about that?
Yeah, I'm telling you, it was something. And as you know, as we look at this video, it's just incredible to see just the water just flowing like a waterfall off some of these roofs in Perry, Florida. Lake City, as you know, is known for their lakes. They have 4 enormous lakes, not only Lake DeSoto, but they have Lake Montgomery. Obviously, with all the rain that we picked up, all of that runoff flows into the lakes. Are you seeing any flooding in and around the lakes there in Lake City?
So far, piece of good news is no, we have not seen any real significant flooding signs because Idalia is moving pretty quickly. Ian last year, to contrast the two, was a slower moving, much slower, and it dumped record amounts of rainfall, as we saw in the good part of Florida. Thankfully, as brutal as it looks in some of that video, and yes, it's like a car wash with hurricane force winds behind it. That's what it's like, but at least in this situation, it has basically been in and out. If there's one good thing to say, that's part of it. It was pretty quick.
Absolutely. Boy, it was quick, but it certainly left its mark. That is for sure. Mark Sudduth for us live in Lake City. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for your perspective. We'll, of course, continue our coverage and continue with you through the afternoon. Kiana, just really impressive video to see out of parts of Perry, Florida.
It really is. And we take another look here, another area that was devastated when it came to Idalia and its impacts. You look at Clearwater, again, that storm surge being the big talker out of Clearwater. A lot of areas across Florida are still dealing with that at this point in time. Not only are we looking at a lot of our power outages across the state because of that high storm surge, but also the higher winds. We've seen a number of winds, Michael, upwards of 85 miles per hour winds out of Perry, Florida. We also saw that out of areas like Mayo, Florida, Keaton Beach, where we had our landfall. Some bands wrapped around the storm came through at around 83 mile per hour winds there in Horseshoe Beach, another area that was directly impacted in the Big Bend. At this point in time, we're looking at Florida that's trying to dry out when it comes to the rain, but we still have our power outages that are left behind. A number of states here in the Big Bend, between 50 to 75, upwards of 75% of these counties are left in the dark. And we're heading through the afternoon into the evening where we're starting to see these power outages expand off towards the north because of how Idalia is moving off towards the north as well. Some of our higher wind gusts, looking at areas like St. Simon Island, 56 mile per hour wind gusts for you. Over towards Fitzgerald, Georgia, 44 mile per hour wind gusts there as well. With that wind coming in out of the southwest, not only are we looking at a storm surge issue, but we also have another power outage issue at hand as well. We see an uptick in the power outages out of Georgia, 144,000 customers there, nearing 300,000 out of Florida as well. So The Big Bend up into Georgia is going to be the area that is dealing with the highest of the power outages, but we'll start to see some of those trickle into areas like South Carolina and North Carolina as well. We look at the state of Florida, 295,000 people or customers are without power, and some of our top counties are coming in, 99% of Madison, as well as Jefferson, 96% out of Taylor, and 93 out of Hamilton. So we'll continue to watch for the Big Bend of Florida. We'll see this uptick in this trend kind of hold steady through the overnight hours. Crews are able to get out and about. And we take a look out towards Hilton Head Island, an area that also is still dealing with the higher winds in South Carolina. We have Fox Weather, your hurricane right after this break.
I'm Brian Norcross with a Hurricane HQ Minute on the question, are coastal areas in the U.S. better protected now, or are they in worse shape than when the great hurricanes of the past came ashore? The answer to the question is mixed. Here on Miami Beach, the beach is much larger than it was decades ago, and there's an extensive dune system which will slow down the surge, except in the most extreme storm. But many places along the coast don't have coastal defenses. A lot of money has been spent making the city of Miami Beach more resilient, and more expensive projects are planned. These dunes aren't just piles of sand. They're made stronger by what's under the sand and what's growing on top. Indigenous plants were chosen to make the dunes as storm resistant as possible. On the other side of the island, the streets are being raised to account for sea level rise and to help hold back storm surge. Streets that used to flood in heavy rain now drain with no problem. But in historic Charleston, South Carolina, and along the mid-Atlantic coast, where the sea level is rising and the land is sinking, the streets flood in minor storms. This flooding was from Hurricane Nicole in 2022, but this scene is being repeated more often now in recent years. National Hurricane Center projections show the daunting problem. Look at the red covering many parts of the city of Charleston and the surrounding area on this map. Those areas could see storm surge over 9 feet deep, and that's from a Category 3. Here on Miami Beach, a powerful storm could push storm surge over these dunes and into the city, and that's a problem. But the daunting challenge comes from the millions of people that have moved near the water all along the U.S. coast. It's hard to imagine how they'll all get to safety when a big hurricane is coming. Hurricane HQ has you covered. Stay informed this hurricane season. Download the Fox Weather app right now.
Yeah, I think we've learned something from every storm. And in fact, we learned that we needed more information about our rivers and where they were in potential flooding stage. And so we've put in the Feynman system that allows us to continue to monitor where our rivers are so that local officials can provide information and warnings and evacuations to people that may live on the river and may be in danger of flooding. We've learned a lot about what we need to do with our transportation system and getting our...
So I think they're all in the process of rapidly focusing on what may happen, what may not happen, and what I hope the people of those states listen to is the warnings when they come from a lot of it, they may not see 130-mile-an-hour winds coming through, but guess what? You may also be on the shore and low-lying area and have a 8-foot surge of wind surge coming from off the ocean. But they've all been through it. The guy furthest north, Governor Cooper, is really focused on it. I mean, they all are. I don't mean to pick, but I mean, he is the least likely to have the most impact occurring on his shores. But it's a lot of low-lying country. I was joking with him. I mean, my state is, you know, when you have anything like a hurricane in my state, in Delaware and suburban and the eastern shore of Maryland, we're 3 feet above sea level, man. You know, you worry about what those surges do, and that's the same thing still happening in Florida, because you're talking about the high tide, low tide, adding 3 feet and so on. So I found them all to be laser focused on what their needs were, and I asked them, but I think they're reassured that we're going to be there for whatever they need, including search and rescue off the shore of the Coast Guard and Coast Guard helicopters and the like.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I have a question for you about, we talked a lot about power lines and having stronger poles. I was curious, some power companies have talked about potentially shutting off power when there's sort of high wind incidences for vast parts of the country. And I'm wondering if you think this is sort of an appropriate response by power companies, or if you think that they should be working to sort of harden their infrastructure more than just ending power when there's a...
I think both. Look, it's very expensive to secure these power lines. Both in terms of the actual structure. You know, we look out there and you see these large towers carrying multiple wires, and the wires are like that thick, and they're carrying an awful lot of energy, and sometimes those entire towers come down. I am not expert enough to know when it's appropriate to shut down that line. And that's one of the reasons why I think having the technology to have these meters on each of these facilities tells you where the danger is. So I can picture, I'm getting beyond my expertise here, but...
You're talking about huge numbers of Americans suddenly not having power because the company makes a determination that...
Well, but by the way, you know, we also know how many huge number of Americans have died, how many huge number of Americans have, for example, more forest has been burned to the ground since I've become, in the time I've been doing this, than the entire square miles of the state of Maryland. Imagine the entire state of Maryland burning to the ground. That's how much is already burned to the ground. So I think as we try to harden the capacity to transmit energy, it's not irrational to make a judgment that you may have to, in a certain circumstance, shut off the power. I just don't know enough to know the detail of how to do that. I mean, where that decision is made. That's why we're starting off. I was talking with Sherwood Randall, who handles this for me, about the need to put these meters along these so we know where the power is going down. You may be able to shut off parts. I just don't know enough to know that.
Mr. President, are you concerned at all that a potential government shutdown would impact the recovery efforts? And what is your reaction to House Republicans who stated they're launching an investigation into the federal response in Maui?
Well, I welcome a federal response in Maui. I think that they should go out and talk to every elected official, from the mayors to the governors to the United States senators to the congresspersons. I welcome, and once they go out and see it, then I'm sure they'll provide the money. Thank you all very much.
Any concerns about your friend Mitch McConnell's health?
By the way, I just heard, literally coming out, and Mitch is a friend, as you know, not a joke. We always, people don't believe that's the case, but we have disagreements politically, but he's a good friend, and so I'm going to try to get in touch with him later this afternoon. I don't know enough to know.
Do you think he's fit to serve and should run for re-election?
Are you running?
I am not, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. The President of the United States, flanked by his Defense and Homeland Security teams, offering an update on the hurricane that is in the southeast at this hour over Georgia and soon over South Carolina after hitting Florida earlier this morning. The President also talking extensively about those wildfires in
quick work as fast as we could, given the weather conditions that we had.
You know, it's been sad. You know, you come here every third day and you see, you know, the gorgeous Anna Maria Island that people come around the world to see, and then to see it underwater and to see it in ruins, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit.
And some of the video that you're seeing right here, the water had gone down when we were out on Anna Maria Island. That was around 11 o'clock this afternoon. But you can see some of those water lines with how high the water was up. There were concerns with the second high tide coming in that there could be additional flooding. But as of just a couple hours ago, officials out here said that the water had receded enough where they didn't think it was going to be that much more of a problem. But speaking with Manatee County, they said as of right now, assessments to damage in Manatee County is at about $2 million. They expect that figure to grow within the coming days as they're able to get out to every single community, every neighborhood that's had impacts. But as of right now, again, out here, the line of cars is just waiting for Anna Maria Island, the bridge to Anna Maria Island, to reopen here within a few minutes at 4:30. And now one of the things that officials have asked out here is people that are coming out, they're asking them to go slow because there still is water on some of these roadways and they do not want that weight to go up into people's homes. Mike, back to you.
Yeah, that continued patience will be key for everyone. Kim, we appreciate it always right here on Live Now.
Thank you.
And of course, we always got you covered right here on Live Now from Fox. We are going to take our first break here of this hour. Coming up in just moments, we'll actually be talking to a storm chaser out there in Florida that was capturing some big moments, and he's going to talk all about it right here coming up in moments on Live Now from Fox.
Low tide, this is actually moving in a bit closer than it normally would be around low tide. So that's concerning as we approach the high tide hours at 8:30 tonight. I can tell you, we've been monitoring the chance of flooding, of tornadoes, and we can confirm that there was a brief weak tornado about 18 miles of us this morning in Goose Creek, South Carolina. A car was flipped over because of it. So we are still under a tornado watch until late into tonight around 10 o'clock. We're also under a hurricane watch, a tropical storm warning, and a storm surge warning. So those are all things that are on a lot of people's minds, but some people are coming out to take a look at what has happened already. Now that we're getting a break from the rain, people are stopping by the seawall just to see how the waves are looking, which right now things seem pretty calm compared to about an hour ago. Obviously, we know we're just approaching the major impacts of Idalia and how it's going to impact the Charleston area. That's going to be really in the evening hours and overnight. So we'll have to see what happens. We'll keep you guys updated as we learn more about this. But for now, people are just kind of waiting to see what comes of this.
Right, yeah, kind of the waiting game, if you will, and it's a very dicey one at that, so we'll be watching very closely. Katie Byrne, thanks so much for that. And let's talk about what's already happened, and we want to bring in now Fox Weather meteorologist Michael Estime, because we know that we've had a number of storm reports so far from Idalia, and it's just going to continue as it continues working its way right up the coast.
And that's exactly it. So friends and family in southeast Georgia, friends and family in parts of the Carolinas, Kendall, really need to be on guard because, as we just said, it has a history of not only knocking down trees, but power lines. Let's take you out live real quick to Augusta, Georgia. It has a population, as you know, of just over 600,000 people, most known probably for the golf that takes place in Augusta. No golfing today, that's for sure, with wind gusts over 20 miles per hour. It is pouring rain right now at rain rates at over an inch per hour. Here's what the big picture looks like. You can see that cinnamon swirl. That's our hurricane right there. And in Statesboro, funnel clouds being reported. We had a tornado warning that was in effect for Statesboro. That was in Bullock County, Georgia. And again, although at this point it doesn't look like that funnel cloud actually touched the ground, when that happens, it would have been a confirmed tornado. But at the very least, funnel clouds being sighted, especially in the front right quadrant of Idalia. And that's going to be really moving forward what we end up seeing. In terms of rain totals, my goodness, how about that? A soaking nearly 9.5 inches of rain in Citrus Springs, Florida. Friends and family of Lando Lakes, Florida. Boy, out your window, it certainly looked like a lake with nearly 6 inches of rain for you. Power outages are going to be ongoing. As our hurricane made landfall, storm surge was the big problem. Now that it's moving inland, the big problem is going to be what we call freshwater rain. This is not, or freshwater flooding rather. It's not going to be necessarily the saltwater flooding from the storm surge. In the state of Florida, we have nearly 300,000 customers without power. And as this system continues to work into parts of Georgia, it's over 150,000. As our system, our hurricane, continues to work toward the northeast, Charleston, you are next in line for seeing, again, winds capable of bringing down those trees and those power lines. So power
this has been devastating for portions.
An issue. Obviously, if you're joining us from parts of southeast Georgia and then toward places like Hilton Head Island, if you have that generator, you're probably going to be using it here sooner than later. Again, over 285 to near 300,000 residents, mainly in the Big Bend area of Florida. So Taylor County is so heavily hard hit, Kendall, because of our landfalling hurricane, which when it made landfall was a high-end Category 3, low-end Category 4. It's, over 100 miles inland, and it's still a Category 1 storm, Kendall.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the big message here is the fact that it has withheld its intensity for quite some time. We know that it's losing steam at this point, but also the fact that you were mentioning all of those power outages. We have a number of down power lines, and that's why it's so dangerous. When you think about a down power line, you should never go near it, never touch it. You have to consider the fact that it could very well be live. And so when we are looking at just shy of 300,000 customers in Florida without power, a number more customers without power in Georgia and the Carolinas, it's going to be a rough next several hours and even next several days to go.
Yeah, they usually say to keep your distance 25 feet or so away from any down power lines.
Good advice.
Move quicker, they pull their arms in, and then they really start to rapidly spin. That's the same system, the same works as a hurricane, the same systems that works for a hurricane. But you can also see right here, I talk about it decaying. All right, this is the southern portion of the eye wall right here. First of all, that eye is now enormous. It was much tighter earlier today. You can see, if you see right here around the J in Jacksonville, see how it's almost broken through. Once you break that line of moisture, it's going to start pulling in dry air, and the dry air will really decay it very quickly. But look at this. You've got bands of heavy rain all the way down around Fort Myers, and yet this is your system. So it's putting down a lot of rain. This area shaded in yellow, by the way, throughout the southeast coast. Tornado watches, all right? Tornado watches running at around a 10% risk, according to the Storm Prediction Center. So that's an element of this, and it's not one that we've spoken enough about. We've had one confirmed tornado thus far between Tampa and Orlando. problem with it is when it's in the middle of a hurricane, you can't see it because it's wrapped in other storms. It's not sitting there like a big funnel cloud approaching your area. Okay, guys, I'm going to finish this up and just quickly show you what we're dealing with as far as storm surge. Right now, the number is still the potential for 5 to 8 feet. The biggest number we had, I told you earlier, was about 10 feet, just shy of 10 feet in Cedar Key. But look at the fastest rise we had anywhere. All right, this is the Steinhatchee River, right around Cedar Key. Went from 1 foot to 8.2. 1 foot to 8.02. So 1 foot to 8 feet. In less than an hour. That's like watching your bathtub fill up. You actually watch the river level rise. The good news is it has receded very quickly as well. As the storm pushed away, it started pushing the water out of the river. So that's the good news. But yeah, there's been a lot of damage and more damage to come. There'll be a lot of rain, and it's yet to finish with the southeast coastline. Lana, it's all yours.
Well, Lana, I want to ask you about that because we heard President Biden say that this is still dangerous, but then we also heard South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster say, you know, this storm is basically weakened to the point that we're not concerned. We want to get everything back up and running. Who's right?
You betcha. Okay. I think I'm appreciative of both approaches here. I mean, you do not want to let your guard down and say, okay, look, there's nothing else to worry about. The president has to say, look, it's still dangerous. And is it dangerous? Yes, I agree, it still is. Is it as bad as it was? It's a fraction of what it was before. But there are plenty of dangers associated with a storm that can still put down an additional, think about this, it can still put down an additional ½ foot of rain. Let's pull this picture up right here. I'll show you. Wherever you see this dark blue speckled out there, you've already picked up 6 inches or more of rain. And now we've got a flash flood warning in portions of Georgia, right around Douglas, Georgia. And the potential is there to pick up more rain. This is on top of what has already fallen. All right, so the potential is there to see, well, this area shaded in white, that's a foot of rain in portions of South Carolina and into North Carolina as well. And even those areas where I'm showing you, hey, they've already got 6 inches on the ground, you could put a little bit more on top of that as well. So, look, we all talk about that sexy number, the winds associated with this storm. Well, they have not been overwhelming. We've had stronger winds, but still, coming on shore with 120-mile-per-hour winds is a strong storm. It's a Category 3, a major hurricane. The other thing we talk about storm surge, and I'm glad we do, it's without question, Lana, the most deadly portion of a hurricane. But you got to talk freshwater flooding. You and I were talking just a moment ago. Do you remember we were just talking about when you were covering Harvey, right? And you talked about how it just sat there and rained and rained and rained. 3 to 4 feet of rain. And look at the devastation freshwater flooding can do.
Absolutely. Lonnie Quinn, thank you. I feel like I just took a master class. We want to take you now back to Florida. We see Florida Governor Ron DeSantis there. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Supporting the needs of the people who are in harm's way or have difficulties. And that has got to triumph over any type of short-term political calculation or any type of positioning. This is the real deal. You have people's lives that have been at risk. We don't necessarily have any confirmed fatalities yet, but that very well may change. And then you have people whose livelihoods have been turned upside down. And so they need support. So we're going to work together from local, state, federal, regardless of party, to be able to deliver results for the people in their time of need.
Governor, Florida is such a diverse state, and this is very different than what we experienced with Ian. How is this operation going to be different? What sort of unique challenges does this operation pose?
Well, the difference is, I think one difference between this and Ian is Ian was hit Category 5 going into Fort Myers, but then it went all the way up the interior of the state, all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean around Daytona Beach. So the sheer number of people who were without power and suffered severe damage was probably as much that's ever happened in a hurricane in the history of the state of Florida. I think this storm, the bands, there's obviously impacts far and wide, and we've seen tornado activity and things even hundreds of miles away. But I'd say the bulk of the storm going through north central Florida, what you're going to see with all the wooded areas, you're going to see a lot more trees. You're going to see a lot more debris. There was debris, of course, for Hurricane Ian, but it was, I think, a more diverse array of debris. It wasn't all just trees. It was different pieces of boats and different pieces of structures. And in some ways, that was a big challenge. I think this, we know where the debris is. We know there's a lot of debris. And so we'll be working with the local communities to be able to do it. You know, some of these communities in this part of the state have never necessarily been hit with a major hurricane before. And I know there's some in like north central Florida, they may not have a debris removal contract in place, whereas a county like Lee down in southwest Florida, they are going to have that because they know that's something they got to deal with. So some of this stuff, they're going to probably need to lean on the state to be able to help. They're under-resourced counties, and we stand by ready to help them be able to get that done.
And Governor, along those lines, already this morning, we've seen a number of predatory refuse removal crews that are already roaming the streets and telling people they need money to clear the roads. What do you say about that?
There's going to be times like these. There's always people that want to come up and try to scam you. Just be very weary of what people are telling you right now. There are going to be crews to clear the roads. Certainly, the public roads, are going to be done. You get into private debris removal, it becomes a little bit trickier in terms of what is reimbursed and this and that. But certainly on the right-of-ways, that is going to be taken care of, and it's public right-of-way. That's kind of the core mission for debris removal.
Governor, you noted no fatalities reported yet. Was there anything on the planning and preparation side, local evacuation orders, et cetera, that might have contributed to what sounds like an encouraging statistic?
So, look, we'll see as the day and tomorrow goes on in terms of what we are looking at in terms of fatalities. Well, I can tell you with Hurricane Ian, as soon as that storm hit, within an hour after it hitting, there were frantic phone calls to 911 locally there of people that were literally drowning in their house. And it was something that you just... And when I was talking to the sheriff, I remember talking to the sheriff down in Lee County on the phone, just the feeling of dread that those phone calls represented, you knew that there was going to be a lot of problems. We have not seen that in the same way on this storm. And I think part of it is that when you see storm surge of that nature like we saw during Ian, I think a lot of people really heeded the warnings that their local officials issued, because you can't hide from the storm surge like in your house. Like if it comes and it's 10, 12 feet, you're gonna be in a world of hurt. And so it's not worth the risk. So I think a lot of people understood that. You gotta run away from that water, get out of the area, get to higher ground, and you can hunker down in a safe structure. And that could mean saving your life. So I think a lot of people understood that. I think a lot of them did that. We obviously had really significant storm surge in both Cedar Key and Steinhatchee. And clearly, the storm surge there was enough to potentially be life-threatening if people didn't take proper precautions.
Well, we have been listening to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talk about what he is seeing on the ground there in Florida after Idalia made landfall earlier today as a Category 3 hurricane. It has decreased in its intensity. It's now moving rapidly towards Georgia and the Carolinas. I want to check back in now with CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez, who's watching the storm from Savannah. Manuel, how have the conditions changed since we last spoke?
Well, as you can see, the winds are starting to pick up. We've had periods this afternoon with more consistent rain, so the storm is definitely making itself known here. When we spoke earlier, you talked about seeing traffic up along the bridge over there, but if you look now, not a car, not a truck. So that has been shut down because of the potential danger for especially high-profile vehicles, given some of the wind gusts that we're now starting to see. Looking back at the river here, this is the Savannah River. There are times where it really gets going when you get a squall. And so the concern here is not only the potential for river flooding and coastal surge, but also flash flooding by the rain that will be coming downstream from other parts in Georgia and South Carolina, perhaps, where the storm is dumping a lot of rain right now. So what happens? You have the potential for flooding to come from this side and from this side. That's not a good thing to happen, especially in the low-lying areas, which is why officials have been telling people to stay home and stay off the roads. The other thing we want to point out here is that, as you see the winds starting to get a little gustier here, is that even if it's not a hurricane anymore, even just a tropical storm, it still has gusts that can knock down power poles and trees. That's a big problem in these parts because there are big trees. You think about Savannah and the iconic scenes of this city, and they have the potential to, God forbid, fall on homes, but also knock down power lines. And so the big thing here is 5 to 10 p.m., the mayor had said earlier, is the time they thought would be rife with power outages for this specific area as the storm moves through.
Manny, you mentioned trees. We just heard from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis that he's seeing a lot of trees, a lot of debris from where Idalia has passed by. They're very familiar in Florida with this, and you're very familiar with covering it. Is Georgia equally prepared to deal with a tropical storm, what looks like it's going to be very soon a tropical storm?
You know, I've covered them in Georgia before. They don't happen as often, and there was a sense last night that if this was just a tropical storm moving through here, that people maybe didn't have to get that prepared. But the problem there is that if it retains its status as a hurricane, well, now you're dealing with something that's bumped up a lot more as far as wind speeds and the potential impacts. So the other thing you mentioned about Georgia that's a little different than, say, parts of South Florida, where you don't have the type of trees that you have in these more heavily forested areas here, is that yes, you really do have the potential for a lot more trees being brought down, by the winds. So that's a bigger concern here in Georgia, but as well as in the Carolinas. You have states of emergency declared in North Carolina, in South Carolina as well. But it looks like from everything we're hearing from officials that yes, the wind was always going to be a big concern. But the bigger thing they're trying to make sure here is that, especially as the evening hours click by and it starts to get darker, is that people aren't trying to go out there thinking, oh, the winds aren't that bad, because especially at dark, you just don't know when it's flooding how deep or how far it goes.
And the other concern that we heard expressed was tornadoes, that even if this weakens, that Georgia is still watching for tornadoes. How big of a concern is that?
It's a big concern. These are things that could happen way outside of the still eye of the storm, if it still has an eye. So we're not just talking about Georgia in that situation, being in that situation. We're talking also about potentially the Carolinas. Throughout the day, we have heard the alerts going off on our phones, on the radio. We're hearing about different counties having tornado warnings and such. So that's why if you lose power, officials want you to have the ability to keep your phone charged, because so many of the warnings, especially the tornado warnings, will be blared through your phone. We've heard that throughout the day. So that's probably going to create some nervousness with residents, but it's better to be warned than to not know that it's coming. So for many people here in Savannah and in the low country, the Carolinas, it may be a long evening, hopefully not a long night.
Manny, it sounds like we're hearing the intensity of those raindrops actually pick up over the course of our conversation. So I want to give you an opportunity to dry off just a little bit. Do continue to be safe. Manuel Bojorquez, thank you. We want to go now over to South Carolina. Charleston Mayor John Tecklenburg joins us now. Mayor, thanks for being here. How are you doing there in Charleston? You feel fully prepared for the storm?
Well, we've been preparing for a few days now. We do feel like we're ready for what's going to come. We've had a named storm on average every year for 8 years, so we've had a little practice actually. But each storm can be individual, and you got to take whatever comes. But the biggest concern we had here in Charleston, being a coastal city, was the coincidence of the storm arriving right when we were having a king tide, in this case, actually a blue moon tide, where the king tide happens twice in 1 month. That's where the name comes from. And so we were expecting a big high tide tonight anyway, and add to it the rain bands that we're seeing, the rain that's coming, the wind pushing some storm surge up from the Atlantic into the harbor. That combination leads to flooding. We'd see flooding anyway with just the high tide. So we're pre-positioned to close streets in our city tonight. We're asking everybody to stay home, to stay put, stay off the road. That's how everyone can remain safe. we believe our forecast for tomorrow is this storm's going to pass right on out. And we're going to have a beautiful weekend, Labor Day weekend, right here in beautiful, historic Charleston. Come on down.
Well, you know what, Mayor Tecklenburg, that sounds like quite an invitation. I'm going to find it hard to resist it. But in the meantime, it sounds like while you're looking forward to the storm making its way out and having a wonderful Labor Day weekend, what's your message, though, to residents right now? Are you worried that as the storm has been downgraded, that people are no longer going to heed these warnings about potential storm surge or flash flooding or even tornadoes?
Well, we were expecting the downgrading of the storm from the beginning. We knew it would either be a Category 1, a tropical strong tropical storm by the time it got to Charleston. So, but that combination I described to you about flooding is real even under tropical storm conditions. So, for example, we've lowered our retention areas to hold more water. We've strategically put pumps in place to be able to help stormwater move out of the city. We've been cleaning drains and sweeping the streets with our street sweepers to make sure that drains don't get clogged up. So we've been doing all those preparation things and asking our citizens, above all, just tonight, stay home, take it easy, don't go out. And that's how we stay safe. And we don't put our first responders at risk that way as well.
Such an excellent point. One last question for you, Mayor. Your governor, Henry McMaster, said there are no evacuations. Nobody needs to leave at this point. If any of your residents have left, is it a good time for them to come back, or should they wait until the storm's fully passed?
Well, we didn't anticipate having an evacuation order. Some folks do leave town. They should wait until after tomorrow to come back. That's for sure. We do set up shelters for those who are experiencing homelessness. So there's a place for everyone to have shelter tonight. But yeah, we did not anticipate having any evacuation orders, and that's why we've stressed for folks just to stay home tonight and stay safe.
All right. Charleston, South Carolina Mayor John Tecklenburg, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we are going to take a break. We continue to cover all the very latest about Hurricane Idalia. You're streaming CBS News.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret.
Also brought heavy flooding rain to Florida, Georgia, and now to the Carolinas, knocking out power to hundreds of thousands of people. And sadly, at least 2 lives have been lost due to the storm. And so Idalia is continuing to wreak havoc on the southeast, and it has also just prompted a new tornado warning. So we have a newly issued tornado warning. This is going to be for Berkeley as well as Charleston counties in South Carolina until 4 p.m. Eastern time. So this is exactly what we tend to see, especially with landfalling hurricanes, especially those outer bands. They spin up those quick tornadoes. This storm itself, we can see where it's located just to the north of Charleston, moving to the northwest at approximately 20 miles per hour. Now, the population included under this tornado warning, 35,000 people, and that's a pretty decent sized population, and that's why this is so concerning. Looking at this on reflectivity, I want to show you just how intense, how heavy the rain is. So you can see where all that heavy rain's continuing to just come down. And that means that if we do have a tornado, it's most likely going to be rain wrapped. So I don't want you to try to go outside and see this. You should be hunkered down inside seeking shelter anyway, but definitely right now for this reason. On velocity, it's not really that impressive. And so that's some good news. Essentially with this product, we're looking to see the bright red as well as the bright green. Wherever they touch, that's where we typically see that rotation. So thankfully, the rotation that we have, it is very weak. It's not incredibly impressive, but still it's tornado warning nonetheless. And I want you to take this seriously and make sure that you are seeking shelter. Just to the northeast, you can also see we've got a light green flashing box, and just down to the southwest, we've also got 2 flashing green boxes as well. Those are our flash flood warnings. So we've got a number of warnings kind of on the board for us at this time. And so definitely the flash flood warnings, especially just down to the south of Statesboro, Georgia, that is going to be an issue for folks because we are just now, it's 3:34 local time, Eastern time. For folks, we're just about an hour or so away from rush hour traffic. And so for folks that are trying to head home, potentially, they're going to be running into quite a bit of ponding on the roadways, some completely potentially washed out roads and bridges altogether. So that this is a zone where I'm very concerned. But as we know, Idalia is continuing to kind of lose some steam. We're still talking about a Category 1 storm on our hands. So it is just barely holding on to that Category 1 strength threshold. But as it kind of works its way right along the coastline, watch as it does this right through this evening, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, it will eventually be dropping down into that tropical storm strength. And so by tomorrow morning, we're looking at 65-mile-per-hour sustained winds as Idalia eventually starts to curve its way to the east and right out to sea. And so that will be a welcome sight, but that's not going to occur until about this time tomorrow. So the next 24 hours still going to be pretty dicey, and that's why it's important that you are staying vigilant and you are making sure that you are seeking shelter, because notice the center of Idalia is forecasted to continue to track right along the coastline of Georgia into South Carolina. This is stopping this at 11 o'clock this evening. Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Wilmington, Fayetteville, taking it on the chin, and then eventually during the early morning hours, pushing into portions of kind of the coastal plains of North Carolina and into the Outer Banks, and also into portions of southeastern Virginia before it eventually curves out to sea. So I want to bring in now Michael Estime, because there is a lot at play here. We do have this newly issued tornado warning. This is in South Carolina. Would not be surprised if we have additional warnings issued throughout this afternoon and evening. And so we've got a lot. The storm surge, the threat for tornadoes, also flash flooding, pretty much every hazard, we have it on the table for us.
I just feel it is so overwhelming for so many. And I want to bring in and talk a little bit more about that tornado warning that we have, because it looks like it has just been confirmed.
Wow.
So this is not surprising, because if you joined us within the past hour or so, there was a funnel cloud out in Georgia. This was right around Statesboro.
Yeah.
And we had a funnel cloud. And as you know, Kendall, all we need to see is a funnel touch the ground and it becomes a tornado.
Exactly, yep.
And so that's one of the reasons why we have that confirmed tornado warning. Kendall was doing an awesome job. She was describing this, but what you'll see here is that this is going to be for Charleston, South Carolina. We have Katie Byrne that's live there, by the way. That's going to be continuing our coverage. But this is confirmed. That means that a tornado has actually been sighted. It is on the ground. It could be producing some damage. I know that you have 15 different alerts that your cell phone has been just ringing all morning and all afternoon with all these alerts. Take this one seriously. This is a confirmed tornado that we're receiving reports of. You can see where Charleston is, and of course the Ashley River, here's where North Charleston is. This is a very densely populated area. Mount Pleasant, one of the suburbs of Charleston, again, very heavily populated. Generally speaking, just looking at our radar here, and I'm assuming, let me know, Dylan, what you're thinking. Okay, Dylan is out in Weather Command, and Dylan, one of our meteorologists, is also just letting me know that this is a water spout. So what's a water spout? A water spout is basically a tornado over water. So Dylan, let me know what you think, but I'm thinking that right around here-ish or so. And Kendall, feel free to chime in here too, because I know that Kendall's obviously wonderful when it comes to tornado tracking. Sullivan Island is right here. I would say that if there were a water spout, it may be, in that general area. Battery Point, you're right here. As that, again, moves up toward the north at about, what, we said 20 miles per hour or so. That's then going to put perhaps downtown Charleston very close to what is a confirmed water spout. The moment that that water spout moves on land, it then becomes a tornado. Waterspouts can be destructive. We've seen a number of videos right here on Fox Weather. If you log on to foxweather.com, we like to show those videos of waterspouts. Unfortunately, those can do quite a bit of damage too. This is not uncommon for a landfalling hurricane. We still have a Category 1 storm, but as this races toward the north, right along, say, the Ashley River, they're heading in the general direction of Somerville, you'll want to make sure that you get to your safe spots. Charleston is beautiful. It doesn't have very many basements because of how close it is in proximity to the Atlantic Ocean. So if you don't have a basement, where do you go? You go to the center part of your home. You go to a bathroom that doesn't have windows. You go to an interior room that doesn't have, that doesn't have any windows. A closet might be a real safe spot for you. Friends and family in Millwood, at about 43 minutes past the top of the hour here, we're expecting a potential for this tornado to move on through. You'll notice that we have a number of tornado warnings that are now popping up and populating our screen, our Fox Alert system, showing that to you on the right side of your screen. And what I'll do is a little dance over here because this is the newest one that just popped up over here. It does include Avenue of Oaks. So you are now hearing the tornado sirens, bearing in mind that the tornado sirens are usually reserved for folks who are outside. So, of course, I know that your alert tones on your phone are certainly going off as we speak. If there were a tornado, let's start from, and Dylan, what do you think about this? Let's start from left to right over here. Let's start with this tornado warning real quick toward Archdale. If there were a spin up, I'm thinking it would be in this general area. Typically, we look for green next to red, phrase that you hear all the time, green next to red, get under a bed, right? It's because green next to red on velocities, our technology here at Fox Weather is able to pierce inside of these storms and look at the actual wind field. And it looks like the wind field here might be conducive for a tornado to develop. That's going to race off toward the north. Generally, these storms are moving toward the north at about 20 miles per hour. Let's go to our confirmed tornado, or I should say our confirmed water spout that we've seen that is just now moving toward the north. And Dylan just said, say that again for me, Dylan?
It's looking like the circulation got pretty broad, honestly. Once that waterspout moved on on land, it's
okay.
A bit.
Yeah. So what Dylan is saying is that once that waterspout moved onshore, it looks like the actual circulation pattern broadened out some, so it's not as tightly wound up as it was before. But still, though, just in case, friends and family in Charleston, and especially points toward the east, North Charleston, you'll want to make sure that you stay in your tornado safety zones. But, you know, Kendall, you think about the fact that we have not only hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings, we have severe thunderstorms, we have confirmed tornadoes. There's a lot to handle right now, but it really is one of those deals where you just need to make sure that you're parsing every single one of these warnings, know which one is the most significant threat to you, and taking action accordingly.
You're exactly right, because we know that we've got a number of warnings, like you mentioned. You did an excellent job breaking them down. In effect right now, more still to come later on this evening. And so you do have to kind of prioritize what exactly the threat is, the greatest threat at that time, and then you need to seek shelter accordingly.
I feel like it's a conversation that people always have with us is, hey, if there's flooding and there's a tornado warning at the same time, am I supposed to get, like, how do you get to a basement if the basement could be flooded?
Yeah, they always say run from water, hide from wind, but it can be a little difficult when you have both going on at the same time.
So again, just knowing how to prioritize could literally be life-saving.
You're exactly right. All right, Michael, thanks so much. And speaking of that, so we've got a number of hazards at play. So we will continue to check in on the active tornado warnings and bring you the very latest, but we do want to bring in meteorologist Kiana Lewis, because like Michael was just mentioning, we have several more hours to go, but it's not just the threat that we're talking about, these rotating, supercells, kind of especially on the outer rain bands. It's these strong damaging winds that are a major player with some of these storms.
And that's exactly right. We've seen it play out during our landfall. As we head later into the evening, we'll still continue to feel those impacts as well. We take another look out towards Perry, Florida, looking at the trees that are bending in the wind, how much debris is on the ground there. So we've seen this play out earlier in the day, especially as Idalia made that landfall through this morning. And as we go through the day today, we'll continue to watch for some of these higher wind gusts. We've seen wind gusts as high as 50, 60 miles per hour still embedded in the storm. We take a look at, again, the landfall stats as they came through this morning. Idalia made landfall 7:45 a.m. Eastern time at Keaton Beach as a Category 3 storm, but for a moment it was a Category 4 storm, and likely it underwent an eye wall replacement, dropping it back down towards a Category 3. Still, maximum sustained winds, 125 miles per hour, and again, that pressure sat at around 994. As we look at how things are spanning out at this point in time through this afternoon, we are back down to 75 mile per hour winds, still holding true to that Category 1 status, but will likely still feel those wind impacts through the course of today into tonight, and for some areas far north, even early tomorrow. We look at Perry, Florida, where we saw that outdoor shot of the trees bending in the wind. These were the highest wind reports that came through this morning. 85 mile per hour winds out of Perry, 83 out of Keaton Beach. That was where Idalia made its landfall. Looking over towards Horseshoe Beach, 81 mile per hour wind reports there. And we look at the current stats right now, even some of our higher winds still sitting at around 48, near 50 in areas like Jacksonville. On the outer bands there, we have wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour for Savannah. That's going to continue to track off towards the north, following through with Idalia overnight and into early tomorrow. Looking at areas farther inland, we still have some pretty significant wind gusts. 28 mile per hour wind gust report out of Augusta. When we look at our forecast, taking us through the evening and into the overnight, we'll still be feeling these impacts, especially in our coastal communities. Along with the storm surge, so there's a lot to really take in when it comes to those impacts, as Kendall and Michael were mentioning. But we'll focus in on the winds for now. Some of our higher winds are going to be coming in off of the Atlantic, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts in some areas. That takes us through areas like Wilmington, Hatteras, heavily populated areas that are going to feel these impacts through tonight and into most of our Thursday. If you're in North Carolina, say southern portions of Virginia, you are going to be feeling some wind gusts upwards of 40 to 50, maybe 50 to even 60 miles per hour as Idalia makes this track offshore once again and into the Atlantic. So that takes us through at least Thursday evening. A lot of folks are still left in the dark because of those winds that knock down trees and maybe even power poles. We look at some of our power outages, some of our top power outages coming in out of Florida, as well as Georgia. 279,000 people or customers are without power in Florida. Kendall, 173 so far out of Georgia. And Georgia and South Carolina still have a ways to go when it comes to the impact.
You're exactly right. And I did want to briefly update the confirmed tornado warnings that we did have in progress. Now getting an update that it's 2 water spouts that were moving their way onshore at Folly Beach between the 1700 block and Old Lighthouse. And
but it's those outer bands, the highest, most dangerous winds lie within them.
You are exactly right. So a tough next few hours still left to go. Kiana, thank you so much. And Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, and we are going to be with you throughout the entirety of this storm. So we've got the very latest on Idalia, the damage it's caused, and where it's headed next. That's when Fox Weather comes right back.
An ever-evolving U.S. military when we go person to person.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. CBS News has been following this story. Camilla, why is the government relying on these devices to track migrants? But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Doctor, why are federal health advisors focusing on this specific pill for contraception? And knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. I'm John Dickerson. See you on Prime Time. Streaming free everywhere.
Stories that inform. You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire. How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
an original documentary from CBS Reports.
He started out as a fun-loving party boy, but the alcohol got the better of him. What I envisioned was him being in some sort of medical facility. I just thought, what a great candidate for them to learn about the results of alcoholism and what it does to a body. But his body was sold to the military, specifically used as a crash test dummy in a simulated Humvee explosion. I was devastated. I had the box. I don't know if they were his ashes or not. I just held it as tight as I could, and I just told him how sorry I was.
Body Brokers, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
Every year, the main part of our assistance,
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education, both.
The main portion of the funding that goes to individuals annually based on inflation.
So 700 is it for now, and then they can pursue those other monies going forward. But if people have run through that money right now, they're on their own until they get access to the further assistance coming.
Yeah, and we already have, I think it was 12,000 individuals that registered for assistance in Maui, and somewhere over $15 million that's out on the street. That number could be higher right now from that other program.
Thank you. I know that you and the governor and local officials, state officials have all told people that they get out of the way of this storm. So my first question is, are you satisfied that people heeded those calls, both from you and local and state officials? And then secondly, you mentioned the search and recovery teams that are sort of deployed and ready to go. What's your assessment so far on what those needs look like if people are sort of stranded right now?
Yeah, so on the first question, I think many people did heed the warning, but unfortunately many did not, right? We're already getting reports of people that chose to stay, and they're getting calls into the local first responders to come in and assist them. And if anybody needs assistance, they should. They should call 911, and those local first responders will come in and help. As far as the entire footprint of those resources that are available, it's a combined effort, recognizing the capability that the state already has with all of their resources, and we have additional resources that are integrated in with that operation. So if we need to immediately augment, we have resources that are ready to deploy as soon as requested without hesitation and without interruption.
But is it clear yet how many people may be stranded?
Oh, I don't have a number on how many, no.
From the initial assessment, what would you say are the most damaged areas, and what was the response from the population in those areas to the government's instructions?
I would say that initial reports are in that Big Bend area that have had the greatest impact. They have experienced the greatest amount of storm surge. They experienced the greatest wind speeds. And so when we do get out to start assessments, that would be my anticipation of where we would experience the greatest amount of damage and impact across Florida.
And how did people respond in those areas?
Again, I think many people did heed the warnings, and there was a lot of public messaging that went out there to let people understand that the danger is not just the cone of the hurricane, but it's the storm surge and the water, which is creating and causing the most fatalities in these events. But again, many people did not, as we are hearing about our first responders going in to support rescuing people from their homes that are now stranded.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up way in the back and then edge it. Thanks. On the immediate needs funding, I'm curious if you have recognized the potential long-term ongoing recovery efforts that could be at risk here.
So if I understand the long-term recovery efforts based on right now, or what it looks like going into the next fiscal year?
Going into the next fiscal year, which ones are at risk here if you do not get the funding you need?
Yeah, so what immediate needs funding does is the work does not stop, right? The projects continue to go underway, our longer-term recovery projects for the variety of disasters that we've experienced over the year. The obligation or the reimbursement of the funding for those is delayed into the next fiscal year. If it gets delayed into the next fiscal year, then that just starts us out at a smaller balance of what we had anticipated our needs would be for fiscal year 24.
Are there any ongoing efforts, though, that you've identified that would be at risk if it comes to that?
Again, the funding or the work itself does not stop. It's the funding that just gets delayed into the next fiscal year.
And last question. I want to take you back to Hawaii, Administrator, because there's still a lot of questions among officials in Maui and Lahaina and across Hawaii about who was in charge in the hours as the fires burned and then the hours after. You're a veteran local emergency management official, state emergency management official now at the federal level. How do you assess how officials there responded? Are there lessons to be learned perhaps for other communities? And is your agency prepared to work with congressional Republicans if they launch investigations as they say they will?
Again, I was not there during the response, and so I would be out of line to assess how they responded during the time because I did not experience what they were experiencing. What the federal government does is we come in and we support their efforts, and that's exactly what we did, and we will continue to support their recovery and their rebuilding efforts as they move forward.
Were you being properly briefed by FEMA authorities in Hawaii that would have been working with those officials?
What I was briefed on throughout the time is my regional administrator, Bob Fenton, happened to be in Oahu for another meeting, and he
All right, that was the FEMA update during the White House briefing. Wanted to bring that to your attention right here on Live Now from Fox. We have a live look here, of course, at our radar that we continue to showcase there, the hurricane right now. We want to continue our coverage. Let's take you right out now to a really visual live shot. This is out of Fox 35 Orlando. Let's listen right here on Live Now.
Around here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. A lot of people don't want to lose their things, and they're worried about leaving it behind.
Are you seeing anything in the water while you're walking?
Yeah, I know. I'm watching.
Yeah. Snakes, maybe?
There's little fish. I know we've seen a bunch of little fish.
We saw some snakes earlier.
Oh, no.
And the water's not entirely clean.
No, it's not. It's really not safe to be walking through, period, unless you absolutely have to.
That's what I'm thinking, too. And at least if you're going to go through, try to put some boots on. But I'm looking especially at this side. That's pretty dramatic, that waterfall. You say, though, during storms, Crystal River gets like this a lot.
All the time, all the time. Down here in Zone A, they get floated. They get seriously deep down here because they're so close to the water.
All right, so the big story this afternoon was that so-called high tide coming in at 4:44. All the officials were saying you've got to get out of there because the water's going to get up to potentially 9 feet above where it was. Yet your husband said that's nonsense. There was no wind to carry that tide. And so we learned that it didn't happen.
Well, what happens is we can't guarantee what Mother Nature's going to do.
That's true.
I mean, it could come in at 4:45, it could come in at 3, it could come in at 5. It does depend a lot on the wind. A lot does depend on the wind.
And I will say this, it's a good thing that we did not have any kind of high tide. It came up high and quick at around noon. That's when it got scary. We thought, uh-oh, what's going to happen now? And then it started receding, and it never came back. And now what we have, according to one FHP trooper, stuck water.
Aftermath. This is the aftermath of the hurricane, and it is going down, thank goodness, and it's not rising. So let's hope and pray that it goes down quickly and doesn't come back up anymore.
Have you heard what happened in downtown Crystal River with the historic shops?
From what I heard, all the shops are flooded a couple of feet, and everything has been boarded up, and nobody's allowed down there until they can make sure that it is safe and cleaned out. Because, like I said, this water is not safe to be walking in unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, very, very good point. In fact, the highway troopers have blocked off access to the downtown area completely. We can't get in there. We'd like to see it, but we've been almost stuck ourselves with you in this area of Crystal River.
Right. Well, another reason they don't want you to go down there is because they don't want you to go down there and get stuck to where you need help because
All right, you're watching Live Now from Fox. Wanted to showcase some of the coverage there from Fox 35 in Orlando, showing the Crystal River there and the flooding and damage right now. You're watching Live Now from Fox. We always appreciate you joining us here. We want to continue our coverage here like we have been doing for the last 24 hours right here on Live Now. Let's continue to showcase what is the aftermath now of the hurricane. Let's continue on right now with Fox 13's Jordan Bowen joining us right now in the Shore Acres neighborhood. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey guys, yeah, you can see what's going on behind me here. We got a vehicle going through the water here. It's been like this all day. We've been out here since about 1 o'clock this afternoon. To give you some perspective of where we were at, this is the Shore Acres neighborhood. It's right on Tampa Bay, right just north of downtown St. Pete. There's a couple hundred homes in this neighborhood, and most all of these homes have water up to their doors, their front doors, their garage doors, and a lot of people are, you know, as anyone would, curious about their homes, how much water damage there is. So routinely people have been getting picked up in Humvees. We were in a Humvee earlier going around with some volunteer rescuers picking people up. They have boats out here, kayaks. I'm going to step out here so you can see more down the road where we're at. They have boats, kayaks, picking people up, taking them to their homes. Some people actually decided to ride out the storm in their homes. We talked with the St. Pete Fire, the fire department here, and early on they said there was no real injuries, and everyone seemed to be safe. It was only a couple inches of water that had gotten into the homes, but when you get outside of the street, it's a few feet, 3, in some parts 4 feet. There was a home, some power lines were pulled down last night, and it sparked a fire at a home here, and that home is under about 4 feet of water. So as of earlier this afternoon, it was not safe enough for the fire department to go down and check on things. That may have changed since then. But you can see we are looking down the street, another couple cars. The water has really gone down since this morning. I'll show you a reference point here in a second of where the water line was originally, but it has steadily gone down over time. And it's just a lot of people, a lot of rescues happening. And the thing is with these rescues, these boats, you know, they only have a few seats in them, and it can take up to 20 minutes to get down to the farthest homes because you just got to drive and idle the whole way. And so to rescue 7 or 8 people, it can take an hour. So you can imagine a couple hundred homes here. It's hard to say how many people are in the homes, but it can take a little bit. So we're going to continue to see these rescues happening. And I wanted to show you guys the water line here over here. If you just want to walk with me here, we were out here around 1 o'clock this afternoon, and give me just a second here. So the water about 8 o'clock this morning was up to about here, and it has since receded all the way down to the sidewalk here, the grass. So at least a foot, maybe 2 feet. You got another guy here driving. So the water's really gone down. Before, you couldn't take something out, a truck like this, you couldn't drive it through a couple hours ago. But you can see there it's really gone down. So that is the latest here in downtown, in Shore Acres, just right north of downtown St. Pete, the latest effects from the hurricane. Guys?
All right, Jordan, thanks so much for that update. We appreciate it, of course, here on Live Now from Fox, and great visuals there to showcase from the storm. We appreciate it as always. We're going to take our first break here of this hour. Stay right here with us. Always more to come on Live Now from Fox.
Just because
hurricane, it briefly was a Category 4 storm. By the time it reached land, it was a Category 3, but still a very powerful storm. It is still continuing to bring a number of hazards. Notice we've got quite a few flash flood warnings in effect in the state of Georgia. I would not be surprised if we start to see a few additional flash flood warnings that are issued in South Carolina here very shortly.
Yes. Well,
but also the wind. This is impressive, folks. We've got wind gust 40 miles per hour in Jacksonville, 43 mile per hour wind gust right now in Savannah. Dublin, we've got those winds pretty much straight out of the north. We've got that counterclockwise spin, 21 miles per hour right now. So I sure hope that you are indoors at this time. I hope that you didn't have to go to school or work today because of the fact that this is just such a tough go of things. We do still have an active tornado warning in effect until 4:15 p.m. This is going to be for Dorchester County in South Carolina. So we've got about 13 minutes or so left on this tornado warning. And so you can see where it's located. So there's Ridgeville. There's also, it looks like Cottageville. So Dylan, I want to bring you in here on this. Not sure exactly the population. Looks, based off of this, a little bit kind of more.
5,000 people, Kendall.
All right. So I was thinking it was probably more rural land, and that's exactly the population, about 5,000 people. But here's kind of that couplet that we saw in previous scans that prompted that tornado warning. It was brief, but it was there. And that's what we see with these kind of outer rain bands. That's where some of these storms, they start to rotate and they can quickly spin up a tornado, and why it's so important that you know where your tornado safe place will be when we are talking and dealing with a landfalling hurricane. So that's what's going on with this tornado warning. We also have the forecasted track taking it through Charleston and Myrtle Beach later tonight. Remember, astronomical high tide in places like Charleston will be occurring right around 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So that is going to be the most dangerous time today in terms of the storm surge. Also, similar situation for Myrtle Beach. But the good news is that we've got this trough. So this trough well out to the west, and then this area of high pressure, it's down to the south. That's what's allowing kind of the squeeze play to take place, as Idalia is pretty much curving to the east-northeast and will eventually work its way out to sea by tomorrow afternoon. So this time tomorrow afternoon, it's going to be significantly better. Then we'll have to be talking about the cleanup that will be underway as widespread power outages, down trees, power lines, shingles, roofs have been ripped off. I mean, it's just been such a horrific day, but tomorrow is really when the cleanup, the mass cleanup, will be taking place. Fox Model, which is exclusive to us here at Fox Weather, shows by 12 o'clock, so midnight tonight, the center of circulation right between kind of Charleston and Myrtle Beach, but the worst of the storm will be impacting the Tar Heel state. So Charlotte over to Raleigh, Fayetteville, Wilmington, that's where we will have kind of the worst of Idalia at that point, and then also right on into the early morning hours for our Thursday morning. So we do want to bring in now Fox Weather meteorologist Michael Estimate to break down some of the storm reports that we've been receiving, because looking behind you, there's quite a few of them that are starting to trickle in from Georgia as well as the Carolinas.
You know, they always say that the proof is in the pudding.
Right.
And toward Folly Beach, what we're learning, that's just south of Charleston, South Carolina, really popular place to go to. Great beach, too, by the way. But they've seen not one, Kendall, but two water spouts on Folly Beach.
Yeah, we were just tracking that last hour.
Exactly. And so those tornado warnings that you were just going over just a minute ago, I want people to take those seriously and to respect those polygons, because if we've already seen two at least funnel clouds or water spouts, the moment that moves on land, it then becomes a tornado, and that can do quite a bit of damage. So, again, it is certainly something that we're watching. We said, again, that the proof is in the pudding, so let's show you what that pudding looks like, right? Over toward Beaufort, that's over 3.5 inches of rain for you. And look at those tropical storm force winds in places like Fulton. This is right along I-95. One of the most heavily trafficked interstates in the United States is I-95. And once you get toward the coast in Savannah, as you're crisscrossing Interstate 16. This is Interstate 16 as you head toward Savannah and eventually beautiful little Tybee Island. Numerous reports of lots of water. Unfortunately, flooding is going to be an ongoing issue through not only this evening, but also, as Kendall was just showing you, through the overnight with that wall of water, that shield of water with our hurricane and out ahead of it. How much rain have we picked up? Well, Citrus Springs, over 9.42 inches, nearly 9.5 inches of rain. That is a ton of rain, right? And unfortunately, that same storm, our hurricane, that produced all that rain is running up the eastern seaboard, Georgia, South Carolina, eventually North Carolina, over toward the Cape, Hatteras area. We're talking to you. It's knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of people in parts of Florida where it made landfall at about 7:45 this morning. You can see it right here. As it moved on shore, it has still maintained hurricane strength. That's winds over 75 miles per hour. Now, how fast are you supposed to be driving on Interstate 95? Well, you're supposed to be driving at about 70 miles per hour, right? As you look here at imagery from Valdosta, Georgia, you can see what these type of winds that we've been talking about, up and over 80 miles per hour at times, can do. It literally peels back the roof on homes. You can see what it does to the siding of businesses. There's clearly debris in the middle of the street. These are tree limbs, and look at how thick those tree limbs are too. Kendall, you know, you look at this imagery here, and again, no wonder we have over 200,000 people in Florida and over 180,000 people in Georgia without power, is because the strength and intensity of the winds that we're seeing. Right. And then you add in the rain, you add in the tornadic threat. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if through the evening those storm reports and those power outages start to climb, especially in the Carolinas.
Yeah, they are going to quickly skyrocket. You can see 184 in Georgia. That's going to continue to increase. South Carolina and North Carolina before Idalia eventually gets on out of here.
Make sure you have the generators, and don't put the generators in the garage, too, because carbon monoxide is always a huge problem.
Yep, carbon monoxide poisoning. Good advice right there, Michael. Thanks so much. Well, let's stay in the Southeast and talk about the Carolinas, because we know that this evening, it's going to be the worst in terms of that storm surge. So we want to head out now to Fox Weather's Katie Byrne, who is live for us in Charleston, South Carolina, where we've had a number of tornado warnings within this last hour alone. We do have one active tornado warning that's still in effect just to the north, kind of west of Charleston. So let's bring you in, Katie. 80 degrees. You can see you've got your rain gear on. You're ready to go. I'm curious, within kind of the last 30 to 45 minutes or so, what has it been looking like in terms of kind of just to the north of you all? Because that's where some of those warnings have been issued, as well as those 2 water spouts that were reported in Folly Beach.
Well, Kendall, right on time. The rain is coming back after a quick break that we got, but we had our phones going off. Like, those alerts were so loud, the ones that woke us up early this morning, too. Everyone's been talking about that in Charleston. Everybody got a 5 a.m. alert about the storm surge warning. Then we got these tornado warnings alerts here in Charleston. Luckily, we were in a safe spot. Folly Beach is where the National Weather Service is reporting 2 water spouts there. We couldn't see much from where we are because visibility is kind of low. It goes back and forth depending on how much rain is coming down, obviously. But we've got a little bit a ways. Right across from us here is James Island. Folly Beach is where people reported seeing water spouts. So hopefully we'll get some more information on that and maybe some visuals in the coming hours. But for now, you guys mentioned the fact that we've got a lot of things going on. Tornadic activity, we've got the rainfall, and people are talking about that here in Charleston because we're just in a tropical storm warning, which I say just because the hurricane warnings end right as you kind of get to the Charleston area in between Georgia and South Carolina. So some people feel like, oh, well, it's just a hurricane watch tropical storm warning, but still, those weren't the things that people were most afraid of. It's the storm surge and the fact that high tide isn't coming for another few hours. And I've been watching this water, you guys. This is the Charleston Harbor. And I spoke with some city officials who were saying earlier that at low tide, it's much higher than it normally would be. And high tide is at 8:30 tonight. That's when people are concerned that maybe this water, which is where Ashley and Cooper Rivers meet, will end up crashing over the seawall.
This particular legislation will be considered with the Ukraine request from the president or without. What is your preference? What do you believe is the most politically swift way to approach this?
I think it needs to be separate. I mean, Ukraine aid is totally separate than whether we ought to help our citizens through a disaster. My experience with the disasters is the federal, state, and governments work well together. It's a time of crisis. So I hope we'll do the same thing with this, and I hope next week we can get this passed.
I want to bring up something that happened today unrelated to the events in Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, Senator Scott. It appeared at an event in Kentucky, the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell froze yet again in public. Have you seen that video, and what degree are you concerned about the senator's health and his ability to continue to lead Republicans in the Senate? I've not seen it. I've heard about it. I hope Senator McConnell is healthy. I hope he's completely healthy, comes back with all of us on Tuesday, and continues to be an active senator and leader, Republican leader. To what degree are you concerned about that actually being true, that he is A, healthy, and B, capable of leading Senate Republicans through what everyone regards as a pretty tough next couple of weeks to get this continuing resolution through, avoid a government shutdown, and other rigors of that job? I know what happened before. His team was, said I think it had to do that he was dehydrated. And so my expectation, he's going to come back healthy, and we're all going to work together we've got to get the budget done by the end of September.
And there's a variety of other things we have to get done to, represent the American public, and I hope we all work together to get that done.
As someone who had the wherewithal and some might say the courage to challenge him as the leader of Senate Republicans, do you believe this should contribute to a deeper conversation about how long he should remain in that position? I expect he'll continue to be Republican leader through this term, and we'll have another election at the after the 2024 elections. So, in your mind, no need to revisit him as leader of the Republicans until at least 2024. Look, my belief is he's going to come back. He's going to work hard. Very good, Senator Rick Scott of Florida. Good luck to you, and thanks for the time. Thanks, Major. Pray for everybody in Florida. Coming up, whether we like it or not, just about everything is politically charged leading up to the 2024 election, even the weather. We'll break down how Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' response to the tropical storm Idalia could impact his ongoing presidential campaign. We're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's incredibly cynical.
The latest track right here as it continues to make its way out of Florida there, impacting Georgia as well as South Carolina, North Carolina, all in the mix here. We want to continue our coverage right now and take you out to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and that is where we find Fox's Chelsea Torres with the latest. How are things going over there?
You know, let me tell you this, it's actually started picking up in the past hour or so with the rain. The waves are definitely getting a little bit more rough on the shoreline. But one thing that I've noticed, a lot of the people that we've talked to here in South Carolina, they say that they've been through this many times before. So when I asked them, how do you feel now? They said, well, here we go again. A lot of these businesses just reopened after the damage from Hurricane Ian last year. And now they're having to grab those tarps, that plywood, those sandbags again to really start boarding up their windows and their doors. In Garden City, which is just 20 miles south of Myrtle Beach, we did speak to one church administrator, Casey Clark, who says that they began prepping on Monday. Now, he's their church facility administrator, and he says hurricane has really taught them something new, each one. This year, Clark says they've made sure all items inside the church are off the floors. Even one small market in town told me that they've put grocery items at least a foot off the ground. They've also nailed wood along each doorway, and they're sealing them with silicone in hopes to keep out the water. Now, business owners tell me it's not necessarily the water that they're most worried about, but really those high winds. Farther south in Georgetown, the city ran out of sandbags in 40 minutes, and more than a dozen cars lined up as crews had to bring in new sandbags.
We got to prepare as if we're going to get hit dead on. And in that way, if we're over-prepared, that's better than to being caught not prepared. So I think for Ian, we just wasn't prepared as we could have been, and we learned a valuable lesson from that.
A valuable lesson indeed. You know, several South Carolina businesses along the coast had even posted signs on their doors saying that they're going to be closed until further notice. Here in Myrtle Beach, I noticed that several businesses also have closed, even as early as 7 a.m. Public works crews were out along the shoreline, cleaning things up, making those divots in case there is a higher tide. And then hotel staff, we've noticed several of them kind of locking up that furniture. In the past, I'd say 24 hours, maybe even close to 48 hours, several families have started making their way out, hopefully trying to stay out of Idalia's way. In Myrtle Beach, Chelsea Torres, back to you.
All right, Chelsea, we really appreciate it there. Live from Myrtle Beach, always thank you again for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. We are going to take another 2-minute break. Stay right here with us. Always more to come, coming up in just moments. And just like that, we're back here for you on Live Now from Fox. Again, we appreciate you joining us here. Our full coverage of what was Hurricane Idalia, now a tropical storm. The National Hurricane Center just this hour making it official there that is now a tropical storm there. So, of course, we will continue to be featuring some of the latest updates as well. I want to go back out to Florida, though, show you another update from the governor there of Florida, Ron DeSantis. Let's listen right here on Live Now from Fox.
Part of the state. So far, there have been 262,000 accounts that had lost power have been restored. And there are more than 250,000 accounts that are currently out of power and in need of restoration. As you'd imagine, the counties that have the highest percentage of power outages are the counties that were in the main pathway of the storm. Counties like Dixie, Levy, Taylor, Suwannee, Madison, Jefferson, and Columbia. Utility workers are actively working to restore power in all affected areas. And they have started doing that as soon as it was safe to do so. So those restoration efforts are ongoing. We do anticipate you could have that these power outage numbers could go higher, but the restoration numbers are going to go higher as well. All 8 urban search and rescue teams are deployed. Our National Guard has folks in places like Taylor County. They're getting on scene there to do things like clear major pieces of the roads and get debris that has been knocked around. So there's a lot of moving parts there, kind of at ground zero. So we've got a National Guard unit there. General Haas going to talk more about that. Coast Guard is active, including with rotary wing assets. Florida Fish and Wildlife has both boats and vehicles en route to the affected areas. And Florida Department of Transportation has been conducting cut and toss operations starting at the southern part of the state as the storm moved through southwest Florida, clearing those roads and then moving all the way up north. And so they are en route to clear all the way up to Taylor County. Right now, Tampa Airport is going to reopen for incoming flights at 4 p.m. By 3 a.m. tomorrow, it will be fully reopened. Gainesville Airport will reopen tonight, and Tallahassee Airport will reopen first thing in the morning. The ports in Tampa and Manatee are currently undergoing assessments, and when those assessments are concluded, they will be able to resume operations, assuming all is well, which we anticipate it will be. There are, as of now, no confirmed fatalities, and those fatalities are things that get confirmed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement through medical examiners. We do not have any confirmed fatalities yet. If you have any questions about how things are unfolding in your area, you can go to floridadisaster.org for updates. The Florida Division of Emergency Management will continue to update that website with all the latest information. We have a really good retail in terms of all the counties, I think, other than the Big Bend proper, the Tampa Bay area. Things are good. Leon County is doing well. We're still assessing what is all going on the ground in the places that had the initial impact. And so we're probably going to be, I'm probably going to try to get down to some of those counties today. But we got a lot of people that are going in, offering assistance from the state perspective, helping these counties be able to stabilize the situation. So for more updates on this, I'm going to bring up Kevin Guthrie from the Florida Division of Emergency Management.
All right. Thank you, Governor. So far right now, the biggest impacted area that we have, following up on what the governor said, is seems to be in Perry. Right now, we know we have a couple of businesses that have caught on fire, a few that have roofs knocked off of them, maybe potentially one collapse. We're getting some conflicting information on that. But we do have crews that are there working hand in hand with Taylor County Sheriff's Office and Taylor County Fire Rescue. So that's going on. Madison County is another county that has been impacted. They have a lot of debris on the ground. They have about 99% power outages in that particular county. So again, we do have resources heading in that direction. Again, I'll let General Haas talk about that. He's got one of his task forces heading in that direction as well. So other than that very specific detail, we continue to search, secure, and stabilize areas that we can do that in. Most of what we're doing here in the Big Bend area is initial search. I will say this, I know we don't have anybody from the CFO's office here, but in search and rescue, in Fort Myers, we were able to clear a lot of houses very quickly because of the footprint of Fort Myers. Up here in the Big Bend, you may have 2 houses that are on a 5-mile road. So that is going to take a very long time to clear those. Now, we have more than enough assets, more than enough resources to get that done in a timely manner, but I just want to go ahead and set expectations. Some of this is going to take longer than what we experienced with initial search and rescue in Fort Myers, just again because of the landscape. We're going to have to do a lot of tree cutting and a lot of push emergency access to get into those areas to then do the securing and stabilizing, but we are working through all of that. We have maintained communications with all of our counties. We did have a couple of 911 centers that went down briefly for about 20-30 minutes, but again, all 911 calls have been answered. There are some minor backlogs in Taylor County and Madison County that again, local officials are working through, and then we are supplementing those resources to help them get through those calls as quickly as possible. I will reiterate that even though we have 911 calls, there is no one in distress that has not been taken care of. The ones that were in distress, we got folks to immediately. We have a lot of people that have called 911 saying, I'm entrapped in my house, I'm okay, but I need help. So they are 100% okay. We're going to get to those folks just as fast as we can get our emergency access teams into them. The State Emergency Response Team will continue to work around the clock to meet the needs of all the survivors, support our first responders, and initiate an efficient recovery process to communities impacted by Hurricane Idalia. We are actively working with our law enforcement partners to continue to conduct search and stabilize, as I've already mentioned. We have a recovery team that's already in the EOC. We, here at the Division of Emergency Management, we activate our recovery team the exact same time that we activate our response team. So our recovery team has already been working for several days getting ready for this. They are already conducting windshield assessments throughout the state of Florida. We will go into the next phase of this will be individual damage assessments, initial damage assessments, where those are done at the local county level in a little more detail to get numbers that will then roll up with us. We already have FEMA that is standing by ready to do what we call joint damage assessments. So they have teams here already ready to go for that. So you're going to see a very, very quick response on the recovery side of the house to do individual damage assessments and what's also referred to as public assistance damage assessments. That's where we check public infrastructure, city, county buildings, things of that nature. So again, all of that stuff will be unfolding most likely as soon as tomorrow so that we can get the recovery process jump started here in the state of Florida. As always, we could not do that without the leadership of the governor and the objectives that he sets for. So again, Governor, thank you so much.
Okay, General.
Good morning, and thank you, Governor, for your leadership and support of your Florida National Guard. Director Guthrie, thank you again for the great work your team is doing to protect Florida citizens. As we continue to assess the damage landfall caused across the state of Florida, our thoughts and prayers remain with the impacts of the storm on the folks. Florida National Guard is fully mobilized with approximately 5,500 soldiers and airmen supporting hurricane response efforts. Post-landfall, Guard elements have been providing support to our state and local partners with mission sets including reconnaissance, search and rescue, damage assessment, and route reconnaissance operations. Our 53rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team is heavily engaged in Florida's western coastal counties, primarily conducting ground search and rescue and route clearance operations. In fact, Florida Guardsmen are conducting high water vehicle rescues in Hernando and Taylor counties. Likewise, our 164th ADA Brigade is conducting similar missions throughout our central and northeast counties. We maintain additional immediate response forces available to rapidly reinforce our presence and capabilities in areas with greatest need, like Taylor County. We are embedded with each of our impacted county emergency operations centers and remain ready to provide support as requested. As briefed earlier, the Florida National Guard currently has 2,400 vehicles, including high water and high mobility vehicles, 14 rotary wing aircraft conducting planned urban search and rescue operations this afternoon, and 23 small watercraft on hand to support riverine operations as needed. Additionally, Florida is receiving assistance from other state National Guards. We are expecting 2 truck companies, one from South Carolina and the other from Tennessee. And we're also preparing to receive 3 UH-60 helicopters from Kentucky. At the same time, Maryland, Tennessee, and Colorado are standing by in case we need additional air assets. We remain grateful to our fellow Guard states for their assistance and support. Your Florida National Guard is prepared to accomplish any mission required by the Florida Department of Emergency Management, and we stand ready to support our state, fellow citizens, and our neighbors in need. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your continued leadership. Thank you, Director Guthrie, for your continued partnership as we respond to this event. Several days ago we began preparing. We've had our crews and equipment staged for the last 36 hours. Immediately after landfall and the storm passed through, we began pushing those crews into the impacted area. Over 700 crew members, which includes 100 bridge inspectors, 1,100 generators, and 250 pieces of heavy equipment. We've been moving these resources into the impacted area so that we can quickly address any needs, get the cut and toss operations taken care of, and support the life safety mission. In the main area of impact, we have nearly 1,000 bridges that have to be inspected, really focusing our efforts close to the coastline initially. We have several major roadways that go over the Steinhatchee River, the Swanee River, and others. Right now, State Road 24 going into Cedar Key is impassable because of high water. State Road 51 going into Steinhatchee is also impassable because of high water, but our bridge crews are inspecting most of the bridges as we speak, and we'll be finishing those operations within the next hour. We've made a lot of progress. We're going to continue to do so. We've moved the generators that are needed into the area. Most of the traffic signal assessments have been completed. We have about 50 locations left to complete, and we will be deploying generators for those traffic signals that need power. As we continue to respond to this storm, all 13 of our traffic management centers across the state will continue their 24/7 operations, inputting real-time traffic data into Florida 511. Again, that is the most accurate and timely information you can get for traffic at florida511.com. We have 185 road rangers that are continuing to patrol our interstate system and responding to motorists as needed. One thing to remember, there is still high water in a lot of areas of the state. If you see water overtopping a road, please do not drive through it. If you see water, please stop, turn around, go a different way. It can be really dangerous to drive through flooded roadways. Thank you again, Governor DeSantis, for your leadership and support as we respond to this event.
Okay, so we're going to have, all these assets are in motion. So you're going to see a lot of efforts at power restoration. You're going to see the roads cleared in the really significantly affected areas. That's going to just increasingly happen. And we're going to do whatever we need to do to help these local communities get back on their feet. Any questions?
What time did the I cross into Georgia?
That's a good question. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I think it was probably within the hour, within the last 30, 40 minutes.
This morning, at what time did it become too dangerous for people in that Big Bend area to evacuate?
What would you say?
Probably the last evacuations probably happened somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m.
And do you have an idea of how many people might have stayed in the house? I know with Ian there was a form families filled out.
Yeah, so on this particular one, we did door-to-door because it was just a little bit different scenario with much less people. So Florida Highway Patrol and local sheriff's office agencies, again, down in Levy County, had about 100 people that stayed in homes. And then anecdotal, or I shouldn't say anecdotally, but up into Taylor County, it was more in the 50-ish range that was confirmed. But I'm sure other people did stay as well, but a little bit different way to do this.
Would you say that the Florida or Tallahassee has dodged a bullet with?
Well, I think if you look, if we were sitting here last night, we had a track that was bringing the eye maybe into Leon County, and then they shifted that this morning. And so I would say Leon, this was from where we were when it was going there. This is the shift Leon wanted for sure. I mean, you know, you go out there. I mean, I've been out. There's been rain and wind. There's some debris, but nothing. I think like if that wall would have impacted Tallahassee, I think you would have seen significantly more damage. So that bend northeast really helped Tallahassee and Leon County.
Is there any kind of bridge damage like we saw during Ian, Sanibel Island, like we saw there?
So I'm going to let Jared come up. I don't think we've identified that. There are. Of course, in the Tampa Bay area, some of those bridges were closed, some because of water, some because of wind, but structurally, I haven't got any reports that they're problematic. And then as you get in closer to kind of the ground zero, those bridges are not passable, but that's primarily because the water is overflowing. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, that's accurate, Governor. I'd say we're still in the process of doing damage assessments. We haven't seen anything anywhere close to what we saw Pine Island, Sanibel Island. For the locations where there's still high water, you know, we have to wait till the water recedes to really find out what's going on there. But we have not seen any major damage yet.
Are you seeing any significant river flooding inland, whether it be the Swanee or I guess it can even go over the St. John's if there's enough rain over there?
What do we? I'm sure we are.
Yeah. So short answer is we're starting to see some reaction. All of this rain is going to have to drain into those basins. So usually what happens in these incidents is we don't see the actual river action for 24, 48, sometimes as much as 72 hours after the fact. The St. Johns River is a very, very slow responding river. If you remember back during Hurricane Ian, that almost took 45 days to correct itself on that particular body of water. So again, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to completely react and then obviously go back down.
I will say, I mean, the one thing of this, the storm moved a little bit faster than some of the other ones have moved. I mean, some of these things will just dump water and they go, so slow. This one moved a little bit faster, which is, at least when you're talking about the flooding, is a little bit better than when they're slow.
Is that speed the reason that
what does it look like for recovery for some of these counties that were hit particularly hard, like Taylor and Sewanee? I know that Calhoun County was still a mess 4 months, 5 months after Michael.
Well, we're in the process of doing those, of course, stabilize, rescue, recovery, whatever needs to be done right off the bat, power, save lives, all that. That's without saying. But then there will be damage assessments to see what all we're looking at in terms of damages in each of these counties. There is going to be debris, of course. That's going to be something that's going to need to be done. These counties are not going to be able to afford that on their own, of course, even with a 75% cost share with the federal government. And so I would imagine that the state would want to help these fiscally constrained counties. The legislature has typically wanted to do that. We may be seeking better cost share as well. But yeah, there's going to be things that are going to need to be taken care of. And these are the counties along that Big Bend. They just have very small budgets. And expenses like this are not things that they could absorb the way some of our wealthier counties could.
I just saw actually that there was an oak tree that fell on the governor's mansion here in Tallahassee. And is your wife and kids okay?
We're fine. In fact, she called me probably about 45 minutes ago and told me this is a really, I guess, ancient oak tree split in half. and part of it fell. I don't know that it fell on like the residents per se. I think it was a little bit off to the side, so that's going to be cleared. I don't know if they're going to have to cut down the whole tree. If they do cut down the whole tree, that's just going to be more room for my kids to hit baseballs in. And so, in some respects, for us, even though the tree was nice, we'll probably make do and just be quite all right.
Can you comment on some of the healthcare facilities in these smaller counties? Did any of them have to close?
So I'll let Kevin do. I've spoken with a number of the main chains who had closed hospitals in the Tampa Bay area. They're all doing very, very well. Most of them are, going to be reopening today if they haven't already done that. And of course, they have a footprint further up into the Nature Coast. Do you want to talk about the others?
Yeah. So we did have a couple of assisted living facilities and nursing homes that did have to do some evacuations, but they did that as a part of the evacuations that we called for 2 days ago. To date, as of this minute, there have been no reports of any issues inside the health and medical industry, whether that's assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes, or hospitals. So everybody is reporting what we would call green, and they're good to go, and everything's all right.
And just as a follow-up, do you know, give or take, how many patients would have had, residents would have had to be transferred?
Yeah. I don't have those numbers right here. We can get with the Agency for Healthcare Administration, Secretary Weta, or even Secretary Latipo and figure out what those numbers actually were.
Can you kind of talk about the discrepancy between some numbers that are being reported on fatalities and citing FHP and you saying that there's no?
So there's a process for confirmed fatalities that just goes through law enforcement and medical examiners, and then they do that. And so that has not been done yet, where we've had a confirmation. Now, I know there's unconfirmed reports. Those may end up becoming confirmed. And then, of course, we deal with this in every storm. What is a fatality that is a direct result of the storm versus what would be something where, you have a fatality that's unfortunate, but may not necessarily have a causal factor with the storm. I mean, for example, in Fort Myers Beach, people, there were fatalities because of that storm surge, no question. Well, if you're out the day after the storm and you're picking up debris from your yard and somebody has like a fatal heart episode, does that count as a storm-related death? So they always argue these things backwards and forwards. But when there are confirmed fatalities, those fatalities will be put out by the authorities. But there's just a process that goes through with that. Now, the unconfirmed, I think there have been unconfirmed reports of traffic fatalities, and that may be storm-related. It may be not. Obviously, it was happening within the time that the storm was either approaching or was on target in these various parts of the state of Florida. Okay, we'll have more updates as the day goes on. We probably will end up visiting some of these areas as soon as it's safe to do so, and we'll be assessing on the ground and mobilizing any additional resources as is necessary. Thanks.
Do you have another briefing tonight, sir?
Probably, yep.
Here's the latest track there for Tropical Storm Idalia. We are going to hear from Governor Ron DeSantis live. That is coming up here in moments. We will bring that to you at the top of the hour. Stay right here with us. Always more to come.
And how and what advice do you have for, as you said, your neighbors to the north right now who are either dealing with the storm surge, watching to see what happens, or even further north into Georgia and the Carolinas that are now preparing?
Well, first of all, we should all stress, heed the emergency warnings. Follow the advice of the experts. The storm's going to come. It will pass. And then your local officials, your state officials, and federal officials, they will come to your aid to help that recovery process start.
All right. Mayor Kevin Anderson, very good advice, and we appreciate you joining us and are continuing to wish all the best for the Fort Myers area as you do still recover from Ian. We want to bring in now Ronnie Frazier. He is the mayor of Fort White, Florida. Thank you so much for being with us here, Mayor. We understand that you're actually coming to us from your phone while you're surveying the damage. Tell us what you're seeing out there in your town.
Hey, Ms. Lana, I appreciate y'all having me. Yeah, we've got, it wasn't as bad as we had predicted, as they were calling for. So we are very fortunate in that instance. But we've got several trees down across some roads, and we can't really mess with them as far as our workers until the power crew gets here. So it's kind of blocking off some traffic. But overall, like I said, we've fared very well, very well.
And, we're hearing that from a lot of the officials and people that we're talking to in Florida. Everybody seemed to be prepared for the very worst. I understand that the National Weather Service still has your town under a wind and hail advisory. It sounds like you're not fully out of the clear yet. What more needs, or how much longer, should I say, do you expect your residents to have to be a little bit hunkered down?
Well, they've kept us very informed, and I really appreciate the National Weather. We didn't lose power here in Fort White until about, in a lot of, I think it's only about 63 residents right now that has lost power. So most of the residents here has power. I lost power this morning roughly around 6 o'clock. So, I know crews are out busy trying to get the power back up. So we just have to kind of bear down. They're saying for the next couple hours, we are still under a wind advisory, but it's starting, I can tell now, it's starting to settle down from what it was this morning. So I think, and I'm starting to see a lot more residents out, and everybody here, like I said, I'm just glad that everybody is safe. And like I said, we very much dodged a bullet on this one.
We are glad for all of you there. Mayor Frazier, so you're about 30 miles north, roughly, of Gainesville. You're kind of in the center of Florida there. Talk to us about how your risks are different from hurricane warnings than so much of what we see, which are the coastal areas of your state.
Well, we have to worry more about wind. I know Governor DeSantis was talking about, I believe what he used is run from the water and hide from the wind. We're more worried about the wind. If you're on the coastal structure, all Floridians are used to the coastal structure. You have to worry about the surge, the storm surge. And, I know a little town that I'm very partial to, which is Cedar Key, do a lot of fishing out of. They got hit very hard this morning, I think, as y'all are aware of. The storm surge there is a lot different from what we have to worry about here in the town of Fort White.
Well, I'm wondering, before we say goodbye to you, Mayor Frazier, is there anything there since we have the opportunity of you being with us just on the phone, if you can show us anything about the situation?
Well, we got a tree. Yeah, we got a tree down. If y'all can see that, I'm not very good with
this. Oh yeah, we can definitely see that right there.
That's one of them, and that's what we're dealing with. We've got about 4 or 5 of these trees about like this around town. That are blocking some of our roads for the residents. But, overall, like I said, me and the workers here in town, our town representatives, got out this morning as soon as we was able to. The wind died down a little bit, and surveyed everything. And like I said, there's debris everywhere. But overall, we got power lines down, but we're waiting on power companies to get here. But overall, like I said, we were, God was with us, is all I can say. Like I said, he kept his hand on us, kept us safe. Everybody here in town is safe.
Glad to hear y'all weathered the storm so well. Mayor Ronnie Frazier, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lana. Yes, ma'am.
Coming up, it is America Decides. The federal government is responding to Hurricane Idalia, what President Biden is saying about the storm. Plus, Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott joins Major Garrett to discuss the impacts of the hurricane and FEMA funding. America Decides is next. You're streaming CBS News.
If
It's important to our nation.
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
It's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm here. Fire is out. They're doing wellness checks when people are trapped inside their homes.
How's the pay?
A lot better.
That's you and the Queen.
That's beautiful.
An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt. Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What are the risks that they're looking at? I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. I think there are a lot of tough issues that our country is facing.
Does this mandate make sense?
That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil, contextualized conversation with perspective.
Grows and a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Tonight, Hurricane Idalia slams ashore with record-breaking storm surge, team coverage from the Florida coast. And as Georgia and the Carolinas brace for
personnel with over 60 vehicles that can move through high water are staged and ready to deploy quickly from Kinston, Elizabethtown, Rockingham, and Lillington. Brunswick, Northampton, and Terrell Public Schools will or have already released early today. Beaufort, Brunswick, Craven, Duplin, Greene, Jones, Lenore, Onslow, Pamlico, Pitt, Robinson, Sampson, Scotland, and Wayne public school systems have already closed for tomorrow. Bladen, Carteret, Columbus, Dare, Harnett, Hoke, Hyde, both mainland and Ocracoke, New Hanover, Pender, and Terrell will be remote or asynchronous tomorrow as well. In addition to the preparedness steps Governor Cooper mentioned, make sure you pay close attention to your local weather forecast and have multiple ways to receive weather alerts and warnings. Follow any directions that may be issued by your local government officials. Be prepared for the possibility of power outages and flash flooding, and remember to avoid driving on flooded roads. Turn around, don't drown. If you have yard waste on your curb, move that away from the street so it does not wash away and clog storm drains. That could cause or worsen flash flooding in your neighborhood. If your power goes out, be prepared with battery-powered light sources. Avoid using candles and never use a generator or grill inside your home or garage. Generators and grills create deadly carbon monoxide fumes. As always, and as the governor mentioned, readync.gov is your source for emergency preparedness information to make sure your family is ready. Once the storm has passed and we ensure the needs are met here in North Carolina, we will quickly assess availability of resources and turn our attention to helping other states that were hit harder than North Carolina. Thank you to our local emergency management and public safety agencies for the work they are doing today to protect our communities. The state emergency response team stands ready to support the 10.6 million North Carolinians and visitors. Finally, here in North Carolina, we utilize a whole of community approach, and each of you are an important part of that. Remember to take care of yourselves and your community, especially those friends and neighbors who may be vulnerable or need assistance. Thank you, Governor.
Okay, for the reporters in the room, if you can approach the microphones on the side if you have questions, and then if any reporters have called in, we'll go to those. Yes, sir.
Governor Josh Chapin here, ABC 11. Is it fair to say that you're focused less on the Triangle and the Raleigh-Durham area? You mentioned east of I-95, so maybe you could be more specific. And we see some of the school closures there, so is it fair to say that it's not Triangle focused?
One of the things that people need to remember, you see this cone of influence, so to speak, of the hurricane. You can still feel effects way outside of that zone. So we do expect rain here in the Triangle, but we think most of the heavier rains will be east of I-95.
All right, this is Lexi Petrovich here on the desk right now. Thanks so much for being with us on live now from Fox. We're going to continue this hurricane coverage, take you out to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who just stepped up to the podium, giving an update here from Florida. Let's listen in live.
Getting help. Accordingly, the search and rescue operations have been ongoing from the moment that the storm passed in the hardest hit areas, and they've probably gone through about 70% of the areas that they need to be able to check for people that are in distress. And so far all signs have been positive. There is, of course, a lot of debris to clean up, but we will get working with that with the local communities to make sure that the roads are cleared and people can go back to their lives. As of 6 o'clock today, there are approximately 250,000 power outages reported across the state. Since the storm hit, their power has been restored to approximately 315,000, and that 250,000 number is actually a decline from what it was a few hours ago. So we appreciate the rapid attention to restoring power. Clearly, the area that has the most significant percentage outages are those Big Bend counties that bore the brunt of the storm. Counties like Columbia, Madison, Dixie, and people are working. There's no shortage of fuel. We have more than enough fuel in the state of Florida. If you're at a gas station that's not pumping it, it largely is probably going to be a power issue. Those that have generators can get that back up, or when the power is restored. But there is an abundance of fuel, and we made sure to have that gone, ready to go. Florida Department of Transportation has 224 cut and toss crews. They've been working to clear the roadways. The Cedar Key Bridge has officially been cleared by FDOT, and residents, first responders, and law enforcement can now pass. Residents should follow the guidance of the local emergency and law enforcement personnel in terms of any type of restrictions that may be on that, but the bridge has been cleared by the state. All state bridges at this point have also been cleared. There is a 15-mile stretch of Interstate 10 that is closed in Madison County, but FDOT is working on that to have that back online by tonight. We have all resources have been deployed from urban search and rescue teams, the Florida National Guard, the Coast Guard, the Florida State Guard, Florida Fish and Wildlife. Those are going to continue until there's no help needed. In terms of hospitals, in rural areas that receive direct impacts, the facilities remain operational and open to the public, and we're happy that they were able to do that. Throughout the state, there were 10 evacuated hospitals. They reported minimal damage, and 9 of the 10 will be at full operational status within the next 24 hours. And ACA is working with the one remaining, but we don't think it's going to take too much longer after that. After the storm, Agency for Healthcare Assessment Teams must inspect all evacuated healthcare facilities which have sustained damage before they can reopen, and they are in the process of making assessments for all evacuated healthcare facilities. Our Florida Department of Veterans Affairs assisted one of Florida's federally operated VA hospitals with safely transferring veterans prior to the hurricane, and we appreciate Florida DVA for stepping up in that. Schools, 30 of the 52 school districts that closed due to the storm will reopen tomorrow, and an additional 8 school districts will reopen on Friday. And Manny Diaz is calling through the remaining school districts to try to get them open as soon as possible. We appreciate everybody's hard work. It's been a lot going on over these last few days. There's a lot to do, but I think the quick response is helping everybody get back on their feet. Okay, we're going to hear from some of the folks who've been involved in different areas of this response, starting with Kevin Guthrie from Florida DEM.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate your continued support. I know you've taken some flack about whether or not you've been here or not, so let me go ahead and say for everybody, he's been here since 4 a.m. this morning. So certainly appreciate that, sir, for all your support. The division is boots on the ground. We are working through everything that is happening. We've completed 75%. Urban Search and Rescue personnel have completed 75% of the hasty search and primary search for the entire impacted area. So all the way from Southwest Florida all the way through to the state line, they have completed 75% of that search. Crews are still in the field working now, and they will continue to work through that. The next phase of this is we talk about is search, secure, and stabilize. So we'll be focusing tomorrow heavily on securing and stabilizing areas from getting any worse. We will be working with our secondary searches tomorrow, going back through all the impacted areas, especially the heavily impacted areas, to ensure that those have been cleared and there's nobody there. We are, good news story, we are not finding anybody at home. So therefore, as the governor has talked about, many people heeded the warnings to evacuate. And we so far have not had any reports of any unconfirmed or confirmed fatalities related to any drowning or any flooding victims of that nature. We will then start moving into the next phase of this, the recovery phase. So we will start working to do the windshield assessments and then what's referred to as the initial damage assessments with the cities and counties to determine what type of public infrastructure has been damaged and what those estimated costs will be. We'll then end up working towards what's also referred to as the individual assessments, damage assessments, and that's where we start looking at homes that have been affected, minor, major damage, and coming up with a total to then see if we qualify for potentially an individual assistance major disaster declaration. We will be submitting to the governor tonight for his review the expedited major disaster declaration, and with his approval, we will then submit that on up to FEMA tonight. So that brings you up to speed on what we've been doing. And again, Governor, I cannot say it enough. I'm sure everybody will say the same thing. Thank you for your support from through this whole entire incident. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Governor, for your leadership and support of your Florida National Guard. Director Guthrie, thank you again for the great work your team is doing to protect Florida citizens. As the Governor mentioned, we had the opportunity to survey the storm damage in some of the most impacted areas in Taylor County earlier today. While there, we met with local emergency management teams and witnessed firsthand a resilient community fully engaged in recovery operations. The Florida National Guard is fully mobilized in support of Taylor County recovery efforts, as well as the ongoing efforts in all the impacted counties throughout Central and North Florida. With over 5,500 soldiers and airmen deployed since daybreak this morning, we have provided support with missions that included search and rescue, damage assessment, route clearance, and this afternoon our rotary wing aviation assets are conducting reconnaissance flights across the impacted area of the storm. Since we were just there, I'd like to highlight some of the missions conducted in Taylor County. Our 153rd Cavalry Squadron is the main effort, assisted by an engineer company. This force of around 300 soldiers and airmen are conducting air and ground search and rescue, route clearance, and debris removal. As of this evening, we've cleared over 150 miles of roads in 5 counties. Part of this task force is an Air Force Engineer Squadron, Red Horse. This highly trained organization is a heavy construction unit that quickly moves debris and clears routes for our first responders. Their efforts have cleared routes for our teams to conduct door-to-door wellness checks of our fellow Floridians. And finally, our air operations is currently en route to the Perry Foley Airport to set up air operations, critical air traffic control operations. Your Florida National Guard is ready to support relief operations for as long as needed. We are your friends and neighbors, and we will be in the impact of with the communities until the job is done. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership and continued dedication to healthcare, and thank you, Director Guthrie, for all that you're doing here to help the state. The Agency for Healthcare Administration has employees working around the clock. Just yesterday, we reported over 1,100 calls that were made to facilities, and that's something that we're doing daily. The numbers obviously change, but we have folks working very hard on this. One of the first things we did was open up an event in the health facility reporting system, which requires all residential and inpatient healthcare providers and hospitals to submit updates on census, bed availability, evacuation, and receiving status, power outages, generator status by 10 a.m. daily, and whenever a situation changes. And we've been very happy with the reporting so far, although we want everyone to keep it up. We rely on the self-reporting for decision makings. That remains in place for all 67 counties. The agency, as the governor mentioned, the agency is currently performing assessments at every facility that was evacuated and other facilities to make sure that we can open up these facilities as quickly as possible. And we're going to continue that effort until they are all open. For health facilities with storm damage, we follow the damage assessment guidelines that are available on our website if anybody would care to look. I just also wanted to tick off a couple of other helpful resources that we found helpful to publicize during Hurricane Ian. They're also available on our website. The Dialysis Patient Assistance Hotline is active for patients who are unable to reach their facility or nursing homes needing assistance getting patients to centers post-storm. The hotline is 1-800-823-3773. Also, Teladoc is providing free virtual healthcare services, including general medical telehealth visits, non-emergency services, and prescription refills to all Florida residents, first responders, and others directly impacted by the hurricane. To call Teladoc directly, the number is 855-225-5032. And for other info, I encourage you to look at our hurricane webpage, which is available on our website. Again, thank you, Governor, for your leadership.
Jared.
Good evening. Thank you, Governor DeSantis. FDOT's 700 deployed crew members and teams across Florida in our department's emergency operations centers have worked tirelessly through the night and all day today to bring a sense of normalcy to all the communities impacted by Hurricane Idalia. Many major bridges that were flooded earlier this morning have reopened, such as the Howard Franklin Bridge, the Courtney Campbell Causeway, and Sunshine Skyway Bridge in the Tampa region. As of 5 p.m. this evening, all state bridges have been inspected, as the governor mentioned, and cleared across the state. We are also able to announce that Sunrail service in Central Florida will resume starting tomorrow morning. I was able to survey the ground zero damage in Taylor County this afternoon and see everything firsthand. It was evident that there was a need for traffic signal restoration, generator deployment, and debris clearing, all of which FDOT is actively supporting, including additional generators being delivered tonight by 6:30 p.m. Many Floridians, such as myself, have lived and worked through hurricanes throughout the years, and it's always encouraging to see the resilience of our communities as they recover. Under the governor's leadership, we're committed to continuing that effort toward recovery and are very appreciative of the governor's consistent leadership throughout this entire event. I can't stress enough how valuable Florida 511 is as you travel through the state. Florida 511 is the place to get the most accurate and timely traffic information as you are making your way to your destination. Please go to florida511.com. And remember, safety doesn't happen by accident. Always drive safely, remain alert, and buckle up. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership.
For those areas of the state that were most significantly impacted, Governor DeSantis and myself are committed to providing all the resources necessary to get these schools back up and running and get our kids back in the classroom in person. Prior to the storm and until landfall, we at the Department of Education were in direct contact with schools around the state to ensure they took the necessary precautions to ensure student safety. The department maintains a real-time accounting of school closures and reopening on our website that is updated by the minute as local decisions are made. Myself and my staff have been on the phone directly with superintendents all day today to assess the situation in their communities and to offer our support. I was encouraged in particular by Leon County Schools announcing that they would be open on Friday. As we know,
all right, you've been listening in here to this update out of Florida as we listen to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and other officials giving us yet another briefing here about Idalia that had hit as a Category 3 hurricane there, especially in the morning hours. We watched some of the impacts there, and today we are going to continue to bring you more of these updates. Let's go out live right now to Fox 13's Kaylee Tracy, who's joining us live from Pinellas County. Tracy, thanks so much for joining us here. What are you seeing? Obviously, we can just tell from briefly being behind the camera there that you have a lot of flooding behind you. The streets are